But from what I'd heard about everything she'd been through, this didn't seem like how things were supposed to go. Something about this felt off. Emma really wanted to ask if they could eat first, but the words reached her lips and she swallowed them back. I'd already guessed what Emma was thinking. I said seriously, you haven't eaten properly in a long time. Going straight to a restaurant and eating greasy, salty food would be hard on your stomach. The hospital has meals for patients and some restaurants nearby. Specialize in light meals for people recovering from illness. Stick to bland food for the next couple of days. We can talk about everything else once you've recovered. Oh, okay, Emma murmured. She felt like everything was slipping further and further out of her control, and that made her a little uneasy. But it was obvious I was concerned about her health, and warmth quietly spread through her heart. Tell me about yourself and your family. I got straight to the point. Start with yourself. I want to know what skills you picked up during your first life. Do you know any ways to make a fortune in the future? Don't tell me that, besides cooking and taking care of people, you didn't learn a single useful skill. From what I remembered about those stories, with real heiresses and wealthy young heirs, when they got their first chance at rebirth, they usually came back knowing all kinds of things, like secret codes, stocks, lottery numbers, future trends, and so on. After being reborn, they'd usually start by buying lottery tickets, then invest in stocks, then build connections with people destined for success, and finally rise to the top. Surely this girl had learned something useful too. I'm really good at studying. Emma scratched her head. As for the future, well, there'll be a pandemic in 2020, and it'll last for 3 years. We could invest in masks ahead of time. And AI is going to become huge in the future. The trade war is going to start this year too. Oh, and there'll be chip supply cutoffs later. We could invest in that. Also, we could buy BYD stock or something. That's all too far off. I shook my head. What about actual skills? Acupuncture or medicine? Elite hacking? Music composition? Genius level design? Or maybe a photographic memory? Emma shook her head, looking a little dejected. Useless, I said without holding back. What a waste of a rebirth. How can you say that? Emma protested, clearly unconvinced. Isn't knowing the future important? Not really. I shook my head. Because if we want to ride the wave and make it big, we need capital. Without money, knowing future trends won't get us very far. There are plenty of smart people in this world who can predict where things are headed, but they don't have the capital to take advantage of it. And I'm already building up my capital, even if I don't know exactly what's coming when the big opportunities arrive. I can use my capital to put myself right at the center of them and ride the momentum straight to the top. The confidence and ambition in my voice left Emma staring at me for a moment. Besides, I gave Emma a casual glance. For a capitalist, the most important things are information and judgment. In the future, I'll build my own intelligence network and have professional teams analyzing everything for me. So, everything you just told me is useful, sure, but it's a bonus, not something I desperately need. As for the one thing you mentioned that would actually help me the most, as long as I have enough money, I can eventually figure it out myself. I said with complete confidence, I have the coded information my mentor gave me, with the wealth I'm accumulating, as long as I'm willing to burn enough money. I'll eventually find the right path. Oh, right. Something else occurred to me. About getting revenge on the Lin family? Don't tell me your whole plan is just cutting them out of your life. And when they come begging on their knees for you to return someday, you'll simply refuse to go back? Emma scratched her head awkwardly. Well, yeah, that pretty much is my plan. What a waste of a rebirth. I shook my head. Ryan, tell my future wife about our glorious achievements so far. Sister-in-law? Ryan sounded a little proud himself. Your fiancé has already sent his biological dad, biological mom, 5th sister, 6th sister, and Madison to the police station at least once. As things stand now, his parents had to pay a huge amount of compensation. His 5th sister lost 2 car dealerships. His 6th sister and Madison are both out on bail. The 6th sister's case should basically be over, but Madison could still end up in prison. Now that's what I call revenge. I leaned lazily against the back of my chair, and I've never even been reborn. I'm still on my first playthrough. As for your version of revenge, I'd rather not comment. Everyone has the right to choose their own fate. You're my fiancé, so I can help you. But you'll also need to prove that you're worth helping. Well, look who's here, Hannah and Chloe. Inside the Lynn family villa, the head of the household, Richard Lynn, brightened immediately when he saw Hannah and Chloe arriving. His face broke into a broad smile. As he warmly welcomed them inside, "Uncle Richard," Hannah greeted him politely. Her voice was gentle and pleasant. "Sorry for coming by so late. I hope we're not disturbing you." "Good evening, Uncle Richard," Chloe followed, greeting Richard just as politely, with a sweet smile on her face. The two women crossed the short hallway, and had barely stepped into the living room when Chloe's brows furrowed instinctively. She looked around at the slightly messy state of the Lynn living room, especially the floor, where several drops of blood stained the white carpet. There was blood on the ashtray on the table too, and the sight immediately made her suspicious. Unable to hold back, she asked, "Uncle Richard, what happened here today? Did your daughter make you angry again, or did she argue with her brothers?" The Lynn family had 3 sons and 1 daughter, and recently Chloe had heard that a relative's daughter had also come to stay with them and was living in the Lynn home. The 3 sons all worked away from home and rarely came back on ordinary days. Could that relative's daughter who had moved in have caused some kind of trouble? Richard sighed, as though he didn't want to talk about it. A helpless look crossed his face. Just then, Hannah's gaze suddenly landed on an A4 sheet of paper lying on the table. At the top of the page were the bold words, "Agreement to sever family ties." Her heart jolted as someone extremely sensitive to legal documents. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. She quickly picked up the document and examined it. Agreement to sever family ties. Her eyes skimmed rapidly over the text beneath the title and went straight to the signatures. The parents listed were Richard Lynn and Susan Lynn, while the child named was Emma Lynn. Emma Lynn? Hannah froze. She remembered that name. Wasn't she the girl who had supposedly come to stay with Richard's family as the daughter of one of his relatives? What exactly was going on here? Hannah continued reading. The agreement clearly stated that the parent-child relationship was severed, and that neither side would have anything to do with the other from that point forward. Emma Lynn voluntarily gave up all rights to inherit any of the Lynn family's assets. Uncle Richard, Hannah's expression stiffened. She stared at Richard in disbelief. What is going on? Wasn't Emma supposed to be your relative's daughter? She no longer cared about formalities, and immediately pressed him for an answer. Richard instantly became awkward the moment he saw the severance agreement in Hannah's hand. His mind went blank. He'd been so furious earlier that he'd completely forgotten to put it away. Now that the daughter of his future in-laws had seen it, he felt unbearably embarrassed and had no idea how to explain himself. "Well," Richard stammered, desperately searching for an excuse, "it's a long story." "Oh no!" Chloe suddenly remembered something. She slapped her forehead. "When we were coming over just now, we saw a thin girl in a school uniform waiting for a ride outside the JD convenience store near the villa complex. She looked really frail, and an Audi pulled up at the same time. I didn't think much of it then, but now that I think about it, that girl must have been Emma, and that Audi. If the girl really was Emma, then it had to be Tyler's car. He came to pick Emma up." Chloe continued, her voice filled with outrage. "This is ridiculous. How did Tyler end up getting involved with Emma? And if this severance agreement is real, and Emma was never your relative's daughter at all, she's your biological daughter, which means this agreement is nothing but a worthless piece of paper." Hannah slapped the document down hard. Hannah slammed the severance agreement onto the table. Her voice rose several notches. "If Emma ends up with that little bastard, then we're finished. What are you two talking about?" Richard was completely overwhelmed by the two of them, talking over each other nonstop. He had absolutely no idea what was going on. How had this suddenly become connected to that ungrateful daughter? Tyler. Hannah finally calmed herself down. She looked at Richard and said gravely, "Uncle Richard, you know about the real heir my family recently found, right? Sit down first." Richard gestured for the two women to take a seat. Then he called toward the second floor. "Emily, your 2 sisters are here. Aren't you coming down to say hello?" "It's the 2 girls from the Carter family. Give me a minute, I'll be right there." Emily Lynn's voice came from upstairs, clear and pleasant. Only after hearing her response did Richard turn back to the 2 women. Of course I know. It's not exactly a secret. Even the fact that he sent the head of the Carter family to the police station could never stay hidden in circles like ours. The reason we came here is because we hope you won't change the marriage arrangement. Hannah's expression turned extremely serious. We want Emily to marry my brother exactly as planned. But why didn't you tell me? That you also had a biological daughter? We just saw her outside, and she looked like she was waiting for Tyler. That little bastard definitely picked her up. Chloe added angrily. You really put us in a terrible position here. Hannah felt as though every calculation she'd made today was about to fall apart. Was the biggest setback she'd ever suffered in her life really going to come from that little bastard? Meanwhile, at the military district hospital, Linda Miller smiled warmly. At the girl drinking chicken soup in the hospital bed, she looked both happy and heartbroken as she said, what kind of parents in this world could beat their own biological daughter this badly? After my adoptive parents received my message, they rushed over immediately. Susan had even made chicken soup herself and brought it with her. She stayed in the room, carefully looking after Emma, while Ryan and George waited outside. George wanted to light a cigarette, but remembered he was in a hospital and gave up on the idea. He felt like his head was about to explode. The things that had happened this month were so absurd that they almost surpassed everything he'd experienced in half his life. An arranged marriage from before you were even born, George said to me with mixed feelings. Why? What century are we living in? But if the two of you really can make it work, then as your dad, I'll support you. His son had finally managed to bring a girlfriend home. So of course, he was happy as a dad, but this was still a childhood betrothal, a marriage arrangement with political and family interests attached to it. So he couldn't help worrying, especially since the Lin family situation clearly wasn't simple. Dad, I finally asked, how much do you know about the Lin family from Shanghai Shipyard? I wanted to know everything he knew. The Lin family I was talking about was Richard Lin's. Richard is the deputy party secretary at Shanghai Shipyard. George thought for a moment before continuing. He has 3 sons and 1 daughter. The 3 sons supposedly aren't biological. The story is that some relatives in the countryside had too many kids to support, so they gave the boys to Richard to raise. His only daughter is Emily Lin. As for Emma, they say she came to live with Deputy Secretary Lin last year. After finishing her examination at the hospital, Emma briefly explained her family's situation to us. Only after hearing her story did I finally understand why I'd never heard of some wealthy Lin dynasty before. 3 generations of the Lin family had worked at Shanghai Shipyard, and since a company with a party organization like that was naturally state-owned, Shanghai Shipyard was the largest shipbuilding company in Guangnan province and one of the biggest state-owned enterprises in the region. The first generation of the Lin family had been ordinary factory workers. The second generation went to college and finally moved beyond frontline labor into management. The third generation was the current Lin family. Richard himself had graduated from Chentangguan Institute of Ship Design with a degree in naval architecture and ocean engineering. After graduation, he interned at Jiangnan Shipyard for a while, before transferring to Shanghai Shipyard, where he'd worked ever since. His oldest son reportedly worked in customs. His second son had joined the Coast Guard, and his third son served in the Navy as the captain of a destroyer. Only his daughter was a year younger than me. She was currently a junior in high school and about to enter senior year, preparing for the college entrance exam. And because this was simply a family of employees at a state-owned enterprise, they weren't actually some rich dynasty. I'd been completely misled. I leaned against the wall and thought it over. The moment I'd heard the Lin family, I'd instinctively interpreted it through the lens of those rich family urban novels, and assumed they were some powerful elite clan. But that wasn't the case at all. The word family could literally just mean a household. The Carters weren't some billionaire dynasty, nor were they business tycoons. They were simply a family of public sector employees. Still, I frowned slightly, because something continued to bother me. Adopted? Dad, are you sure those 3 sons were adopted? That's harder to say. A knowing smile appeared on George's face. I met Deputy Secretary Lin before during an inspection, but I've never met any of his children, not even once. As for his wife, I heard she used to live in the countryside, and only moved into the city after their daughter was a month old. George didn't say anything more, but I immediately understood. In rural areas during the 1980s and 1990s, a lot of rules weren't enforced very strictly, especially in villages and small towns, which left plenty of room for people to manipulate things. Never mind the issue of the switched child. Just those 3 adopted sons alone were worth thinking about. And judging from Dad's expression, he clearly understood more than he was willing to say. So the car we saw today really was from the Carter family. I looked at Ryan. Ryan, go back first. I figured the 3 of them should be arriving soon. Come pick me up at the hospital tomorrow morning. I'm staying here with Emma tonight. All right, Ryan nodded. At that moment, Susan also finished talking with Emma and walked out of the room. She looked at me and said earnestly, "She's a good girl. Treat her well, I know." I turned and went back into the hospital room. Emma had finished eating and was sitting beneath the blanket. Her petite figure made her look almost like a little kitten, and considering how similar her experiences were to mine, I couldn't help feeling a strange emotion rising inside me. That thought was kind of embarrassing. I immediately shoved it aside and silently reminded myself to get a grip. I sprawled casually across the small caregiver bed and said, "I pretty much understand what's going on with your family now. When we left earlier today, I ran into a car from the Carter family. They were probably heading over to discuss something, most likely the marriage arrangement." I continued, "What they want is for you, or if they still don't know about you, then for the fake heiress in your family, to be permanently tied to the fake heir in mine. Now I finally understand why they didn't want him joining the group chat. It wasn't just because they didn't want him having more ways to connect with the rest of us. This was probably the bigger reason. Richard Lin is basically the second in command at Shanghai Shipyard, and his 3 sons work in customs, the Coast Guard, and the Navy. So the Lin family must have a pretty strong network. The Carter family built its fortune in shipping, and even now, although they've expanded into several other industries, shipping is still their core business. So, from the Carter family's perspective, the Carters are obviously the perfect family to marry into. If their son married a Lin daughter, his position in the family would become much more secure. Those sisters of his trying to shake his status would basically be dreaming. But fate has a funny sense of humor. They probably never expected the Lin family to have its own real heiress, fake heiress drama. "If you want revenge," I said with my eyes half closed, "I can deal with Richard Lin for you right now. As for the others, I can't touch them yet." Emma's heart stirred when she heard that. She looked into my unwavering eyes, and warmth welled up inside her. After everything she'd seen today, and what she'd heard from my adoptive mother, she had more or less realized that I was the kind of man who meant what he said. If I really was willing to stand up for her, then maybe she could. By the way, how did you know about me and the spiritual energy? I didn't even give Emma a chance to answer. Before switching topics, and Emma looked at my profile as I lay on the caregiver bed. Her cheeks reddened slightly as she said, "Actually, I never met you in my previous life. I only heard that after the Carter family's real heir was brought home, he went crazy and kept shouting every day that he'd mastered divine martial arts, and that he was invincible or something. Then they sent him to a psychiatric hospital. After the pandemic, the Carter family's business took a major hit. Then, in 2024, the Carter family's patriarch died from COVID. That same year, one of their longtime housekeepers, a man named Wilson, also died. I heard the first 7 days after his death hadn't even passed, before the police opened an investigation into the Carter family. Robert Carter was implicated in hiring someone to commit murder. Michael Carter and Grace Carter, along with several of the other Carter sisters, were suspected of abuse and unlawful confinement. After that, the entire Carter family collapsed almost overnight. As for spiritual energy, when I existed as a spirit, I heard some cultivators discussing it. They said spiritual energy is essentially just a form of energy, and that other forms of energy can be converted into it. Emma thought for a moment. Electricity has the highest conversion rate. You need metal to construct a spirit gathering array, and then place a pseudo-spirit stone at the center of the formation. First, you activate the array with spiritual energy, then supply electricity to it. At that point, the spirit gathering array converts electricity into spiritual energy. Then you place plants inside the array, and after being nourished by spiritual energy, they can transform into spiritual plants. Spiritual plants can absorb and release spiritual energy on their own. Then you transplant them into fertile soil, and they'll gradually transform the soil into spiritual soil. Finally, you bury jade, emeralds, or similar gemstones into spiritual soil, and those gemstones will eventually transform into spirit stones by repeating that cycle. In theory, spiritual energy can slowly be restored. I see. After hearing Emma's explanation, I felt a headache coming on. Then where am I supposed to get a spirit stone? The only thing on me that could barely qualify as one was probably this jade bracelet, but I couldn't even take the bracelet off, so it didn't seem very useful. I shook my head. I heard there are 2 other methods, Emma said somewhat shyly. The first is dual cultivation. That method, well, let's not get into the details. The second one is that the bodily waste of someone with spiritual energy will also contain traces of spiritual energy, so it can be used to nourish spiritual plants. Pseudo-spirit stones don't exist right now, I said after hearing Emma's explanation. We'll just have to see if we get lucky enough to find one later. Computer names, and we can see what you just said about using a cultivator's waste to nourish plants is basically just using spiritual energy to nurture vegetation until the plants transform into spiritual plants. That method is technically possible, but the process takes far too long. The methods Emma described had also been mentioned by my mentor in my dreams. Cultivators in the past had already experimented with the first method. Among different forms of energy, light, wind, fire, and electricity were relatively easy to convert. But when it came to conversion efficiency, light energy was practically negligible. Wind energy had the lowest efficiency. Fire energy was considerably better. And electricity was the most efficient. But each of the 3 had its own drawbacks. Wind energy was extremely unstable. Fire energy was incredibly picky about fuel. It required wood from trees at least 1,000 years old. The wood had to be cut at precisely the right moment and ignited with spiritual power while the flames were kept at maximum intensity. The entire piece of wood had to burn completely, and not a single step in the timing could be off. Otherwise, the conversion rate would drop dramatically. Electricity didn't have those problems. But the issue was that in ancient times, electricity couldn't be stored or supplied continuously and steadily. And by the time humanity could reliably generate electricity, actual spirit stones were basically already exhausted. Even pseudo-spirit stones had become extremely rare. More importantly, although electricity had one of the highest conversion rates among all known energy conversion methods, the actual efficiency was still extremely low. Suppose completing one minor circulation cycle required 10 units of spiritual energy, then 100 kilowatt hours of electricity would only convert into 0.1 unit of spiritual energy, and to transform a piece of jade the size of a fingernail into a pseudo-spirit stone would require at least 10,000 units of spiritual energy. If the process were interrupted at any point, everything done beforehand would be wasted. The electricity consumption would be enormous, and even someone like me didn't currently have a pseudo-spirit stone to construct even the most basic formation. As for the second method, using spiritual energy to nourish plants, spiritual energy itself was a form of energy that could stimulate life potential and improve physical constitution once ordinary plants transformed into spiritual plants. They could use processes similar to photosynthesis to gradually improve the surrounding soil, while also absorbing and releasing spiritual energy. The problem was that nurturing a plant into a spiritual plant took an incredibly long time. At minimum, several years, and sometimes several decades. And even then, not every plant could transform successfully. The mutation rate was only around 1 in 10,000. Especially now, when spiritual energy was so thin, trying to obtain even a single spiritual plant would take far too long. Nurturing one would take at least 10 years, and success still wasn't guaranteed. If it failed, all the spiritual energy invested would be wasted. Even if a spiritual plant successfully formed, the amount of spiritual energy it could initially generate would be extremely low, probably only around 0.001. The spiritual plant would need time to mature before reaching its peak state. and it would still need constant nourishment during that period. And if the plant itself was low quality, then producing even one full unit of spiritual energy would already be considered impressive. As for dual cultivation, the person cultivating with you would also need to possess a certain level of cultivation. During dual cultivation, you would continuously nourish the other person with spiritual energy, because dual cultivation was fundamentally tied to the process of creating life. And during the moment when both sides reached perfect harmony, the spiritual energy inside both cultivators would become exceptionally active, while also stimulating the surrounding natural energy at that moment. Some of the energy in the surrounding environment would be converted into spiritual energy. That newly converted spiritual energy would then be absorbed by both cultivators, strengthening the spiritual energy inside their bodies. As the spiritual energy inside them increased, it would in turn influence the spiritual energy around them. Repeating the process would create a positive feedback loop. The surrounding environment was ideally somewhere at high altitude, with sunlight and water, wind, and, well, to put it plainly, if you could climb all the way to the summit of Mount Everest, bring a few potted plants with you, and then have sex outdoors up there, the results would be optimal. But these days, finding someone with any cultivation at all was already unbelievably difficult, let alone convincing them to climb a mountain and have sex with you. Go to sleep. I rolled onto my side, clearly disappointed. You should spend your time thinking about how you're going to get revenge on your biological dad. You, Emma's face turned slightly red. She looked hesitant and conflicted, as if she had no idea what to say. Why are you willing to help me? Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I answered with my eyes closed. When I went over there earlier, I noticed my second sister's car seemed to be heading toward your house too. If she's planning to manipulate your family and use their connections to come after me, then you're a card I can play against her. And not just any card. You're a trump card that could destroy her the moment I use you. Everything from your examination results today to your hospitalization records and medical diagnosis will become knives pointed straight at your dad. Didn't he publicly claim that you were just a relative's daughter, while the girl at home was his biological daughter? These days, the government is encouraging families to have a second child. But what about back when they had you? I said calmly. Ruining him would be ridiculously easy. He's not a businessman. He's a public sector official, and the deputy party secretary at that. First, we send a formal complaint to the Disciplinary Inspection Commission. Then I take you to some influencers and bring the media straight to Shanghai shipyard with banners. Let's see how he cleans up that mess. They could start by expelling him from the party, then strip him of his public position. And once we add the abuse he inflicted on you, even if he has connections everywhere, the authorities would still have to put him away. Public outrage would have to be dealt with. And even after they calm things down, the scandal still might not disappear. People could drag it back up every holiday season. Even if someone managed to get him released, his career would still be completely finished. Not to mention that once things reached that point, who would even be willing to save him? But I wasn't acting yet, and it wasn't only because of Emma's wishes. As long as Emma remained here, it was equivalent to me holding a trump card that could be used whenever I wanted to control the most important person in the Lin family right now. Is that really all? Emma seemed to have been expecting something more, and looked disappointed by my answer. What else did you expect? I shot back. Everything you've told me, I already knew, and I actually know far more than you do. You don't have a photographic memory, and you don't know any upcoming winning lottery numbers. Anything you think could make money is something I can't invest in right now. And by the time I can invest in it, I won't need your help anymore. So tell me, what other value do you think you have? I waved a hand. Little girl, you've lived 2 lives and still haven't figured out how the world works. If you want me to help you get revenge, then you need to show me what value you can offer. And right now, your only value is as a chess piece. A chess piece doesn't get to negotiate with the player. You're seriously realistic. Emma bit her lip, as though she'd finally made a huge decision. What if I offer myself as that value? I didn't even look at her. Are you sure? Don't tell me you think you're so beautiful that every man who sees you will lose control and want you. Beauty is a resource, and it's a resource that money can buy. With what I'm worth now, if I really wanted to, I'd never be short on that kind of resource. Like I said, you've lived 2 lives and still haven't figured out how the world works. Emma said, there's something about me that no one else has. I can help you cultivate. I was born with yin-yang eyes, and my real date and time of birth was March 25, 1999 at 10,000 p.m. My 5 elements chart lacks fire, and water dominates my fate. I can see the spiritual energy around you. You've already stepped onto the path of cultivation. And I can also see that the jade bracelet on your wrist is anything but ordinary. What? I shot upright from the bed. March 25, 1999 at 10,000 p.m.? That would be the 8th day of the 2nd lunar month in a Jimao year during the Dinghai hour. So you were born in a yin year, yin month, yin hour, and yin period, with natural yin-yang eyes, your 5 elements lacking fire, and water dominating your fate. No way, that's too perfect. I hurriedly closed my eyes and focused, lightly calculating with my fingers. The more times I performed these calculations, the more skilled I became. It felt as though something had taken shape inside my mind, an image of the Zhouyi 8 trigrams. Following the principles of the Zhouyi, I began, carefully calculating Emma's birth chart. A person born in a yin-aligned year already carried a degree of yin energy in her fate. Being born on the 8th day of the 2nd lunar month added another layer of yin, and the Dinghai hour added even more cold yin energy, especially because of the timing itself, making her yin energy exceptionally heavy. A birth chart like this, combined with natural yin-yang eyes, was a clear sign of an innate yin constitution among the 5 elements. She lacked fire while water was overwhelmingly strong. Water represented cold, while fire represented warmth. Without fire, her body naturally leaned cold, and excessive water only intensified that yin nature. Her chart was dominated by heavy water energy, with that water surging uncontrollably, and little earth to restrain it, nor enough wood to redirect it. With water pushed to the extreme, the cold yin nature became overwhelming, and extreme yin, extreme cold constitution. I couldn't help sucking in a sharp breath. I'd actually stumbled across someone like this. My calculations showed that she wasn't lying, and my mentor in my dreams had once told me that someone born with an extreme yin, extreme cold constitution was an exceptional partner for dual cultivation. If I could find a place where yin and yang naturally converged and cultivate together with her, I could use the cold yin energy of her body to balance my own yang energy and increase my cultivation. More importantly, during dual cultivation with her, the spiritual energy released would nourish the surrounding plants like spring rain, as well as jade and gemstones, allowing them to transform into spiritual plants and spirit stones much faster. And once I had spiritual plants and spirit stones, the speed of my cultivation would increase dramatically. An opportunity like this was almost impossible to find. I opened my eyes, my gaze instantly sharpening. A place where yin and yang converged. According to the feng shui principles my mentor had taught me, such a place needed mountains and water existing in harmony, balanced symmetry on both sides, a proper balance between movement and stillness, harmonious energy, and a healthy natural environment. One place immediately came to mind, Hangya Mountain. It was a solitary mountain in the area, unconnected to any larger mountain range. The mountain faced south with its back to the north, and stretched from east to west, with the Qingshui River splitting it through the middle, creating almost perfect symmetry. Near the summit was a natural lake nearly 60 meters across at its widest point, and about 9 meters deep, surrounded by the main peak. It was also the source of the Qingshui River. The entire landscape was naturally symmetrical, perfectly matching the ideal arrangement of azure dragon on the left and white tiger on the right, with vermilion bird in front and black tortoise behind. Streams flowed gently through the mountain, while lush forests surrounded them, combining moving water, still mountain woods, creating the perfect balance of motion and stillness, and therefore a balance between yin and yang. The mountain's energy was also exceptionally harmonious, and there had never been any stories about sinister energy or bad omens there, which meant the place was, naturally, one of the most ideal cultivation sites imaginable. If we were going to dual cultivate there, then I would only need to choose the best possible location, set up a spirit gathering array in advance, select the plants with the highest chance of mutation, and begin at the high hour at night, continuing until the Chen hour the next morning. My face instantly turned green. Forget the fact that we'd have to keep going from late at night until morning. We'd also have to do it completely exposed beneath the open sky, without anything blocking the surroundings, with the sky as our blanket and the earth as our bed, all the way until sunrise. I'd already started cultivating, and even I wasn't sure I could last that long. How was this girl supposed to survive it? Are you sure? I asked, my expression turning strange. My voice sounded noticeably tense. You said that was your real birth date, which means the date on your ID is fake. And if it was deliberately concealed, then someone must have told you about this before. Who was it? Did they tell you about dual cultivation too? Don't tell me. You think dual cultivation is just some ordinary, romantic thing between a man and a woman. I'm giving you 2 chances. First, decide right now whether you still want to do it. Second, hear everything I have to say before deciding again. Actually, forget it. I'll give you one more chance. Once I've prepared everything and brought you there, you can make your final decision about whether you still want to help me. It takes that long? After hearing my explanation of dual cultivation, Emma's face turned green too. Can you even do that? Damn. She'd questioned whether I could handle it. A man could never admit he couldn't. I scoffed. You can see the spiritual energy around me. So you should already know I've begun cultivating. I may not have transcended ordinary humanity yet, but I've at least gotten 1 toe across the threshold. I'm basically 1/1000th of a cultivator. Give me a little more time, and fighting until sunrise should still be possible. The real problem is you. You're still completely ordinary. I looked Emma up and down. Even with your natural advantage, you still might not be able to endure it. Thinking about it, even that sounded exaggerated. I'd probably be lucky if I lasted until midnight. Making it all the way until morning was definitely impossible right now. And as for Emma, an ordinary woman trying to keep up with a cultivator, didn't even require thinking about. She'd be completely worn out in 1 session. Emma stared at me. I wasn't lying. She could see it. Although I was still physically an ordinary person, there was already a faint trace of spiritual energy inside me. And I also had that mysterious bracelet, which contained spiritual energy of its own. More importantly, she could see that the spiritual energy inside the bracelet restored itself automatically. It wasn't much, but it slowly recovered bit by bit. There was one thing Emma hadn't told me. She wasn't only born with yin-yang eyes. She also had the extremely rare condition known as tetrachromacy. Tetrachromatic vision made her exceptionally sensitive to changes in light, color, allowing her to distinguish differences in shades that most people couldn't perceive. That was why, when it came to my jade bracelet, even the slightest changes in its color and luster were visible to her. Emma bit her lip. Her heart was filled with conflict. During the time she'd wandered the world as a spirit, she had indeed learned certain secrets and witnessed how the future would unfold. But she'd never expected that she herself would be reborn. Suddenly returning to this era left her unsure what she was even supposed to do, getting away from that family that had never given her any warmth or anything worth holding on to. Had already felt like enough. As for revenge, she had thought about it, but had no idea how to actually carry it out. Will you answer me now? Emma asked at last. She had already placed her future in the hands of this man, who was supposedly her fiancé. What kind of answer do you want? I asked in return. The truth, Emma said firmly. The absolute truth. The absolute truth. I let out a quiet breath through my nose and chuckled. You really are a foolish girl who learned nothing from living twice. But since you're asking, then here's my answer. I don't automatically assume the worst of people, and I don't condemn people in the present for things they might do in the future. I'm actually a fairly kind person. Take the Carter family, for example. If those idiots in the Carter family don't provoke me, then I'm perfectly happy to leave them alone. But if they go looking for trouble and provoke me, then they can't blame me for being ruthless. As for the answer you want, I can't give you one, because I don't know what the future holds either. But if you never betray me, then I will never betray you. Okay, Emma nodded. Her small face looked like she still had plenty she wanted to say. But in the end, she said nothing. Go to sleep. I lay back down. We've got a lot to deal with tomorrow. Huh? Emma sounded a little surprised. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Why? You're not coming over here? You're so skinny I'd be afraid I'd break you. I replied without even looking up. And if you and I actually do it, even if it isn't formal dual cultivation, it'll still produce some of the same effects. I need to use the spiritual energy we release to nurture and create a pseudo-spirit stone. Besides, you need to recover first. During dual cultivation, my spiritual energy will enter your body through our physical connection and circulate inside you. I rolled over and looked into Emma's shy eyes before calmly explaining that spiritual energy will automatically follow the path best suited to your body and refine your physique. You need to remember exactly how and where the spiritual energy circulates inside you, because that path will become the cultivation technique best suited to you. That's actually how some pheno cultivators developed their cultivation methods. The same principle can work for men too, but this effect only works when a high-level cultivator dual cultivates with someone at a much lower level. If both people are at the same level, it's a completely different situation. And this method puts a huge burden on the higher-level cultivator. At the same time, the lower-level cultivator will never be able to fully catch up with the person they're dual cultivating with. It's that complicated? Emma asked in surprise. Of course it is, I sounded exasperated. It's called dual cultivation. The important part is the cultivation. If it were just about me doing all the work on top, while you made noises underneath me, I could do that right now. I could even pay a few more women to join us. That's only the beginning. We'll need a room built from jade, or emerald, including the bed. That way, we can maximize how efficiently the spiritual energy is used, while producing as many pseudo-spirit stones as possible. Spiritual energy is incredibly precious these days. We need to squeeze every last trace of value out of it. Jade and emerald are the two materials my mentor said were easiest and most suitable for refining into spirit stones. When spiritual energy was abundant, the highest quality spirit stones were usually refined from those two materials. As for the metal used to build the formation, I don't even need to experiment. Previous cultivators already figured out that pure silver works best. Pure copper comes second, and pure gold is the least efficient of the three. If none of those are available, copper alloys work, and only after that would you resort to iron or similar metals. In short, it all comes down to one thing: money. You really are a capitalist. Emma teased. You even calculate things like this down to the last detail. Aren't I a capitalist? I shot back. Isn't this exactly what capitalists do? If you're going to squeeze value out of something, squeeze it to the limit, whether it's yourself or someone else, especially when cultivation was involved. I wasn't going to waste even the tiniest trace of spiritual energy. Aren't you afraid someone will hang you from a streetlight someday? Emma joked with a grin. Relax. I couldn't have cared less with how small time I am right now. Every streetlight in the country would be occupied before they ever got to me. Go to sleep. Neither of us said anything else. Emma was exhausted too. After everything she'd been through, she quickly drifted off to sleep. When the morning sunlight streamed into the hospital room the next day, I was already awake. Just then, the door opened a crack, and a head cautiously peeked inside. Let's talk outside. I didn't even need to guess who it was. I walked straight to the door and pushed Ryan back into the hallway. Wow, rough night? Ryan gave me the kind of look every guy understood. Rough night, my ass. I shot him a look that clearly said he had no idea what he was talking about. Quit imagining things. Call Sophia, Grace, and Natalie. When I said Grace's name, I paused briefly, but still shook my head. Call all three of them, and have them come over. Grace will stay with Emma, while Sophia and Natalie stand guard. If anything happens that they can't handle, tell them to call me immediately, other than the medical staff, me and my parents. No one else is allowed into this room. After saying that, I still felt it wasn't enough, because Emma might eventually become involved with people who had supernatural abilities. I didn't have enough people. More importantly, I didn't have enough capable people I could truly trust. The more I thought about it, the more urgent it felt. Got it. Ryan finally dropped his joking expression and turned serious. Do you have anything planned today? Why? Seeing the look on Ryan's face, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. Something happened at home? Ryan said, my dad told me to. Even if you've got something planned today, you need to cancel everything and go home. Okay. I nodded without saying anything else. I already had a pretty good idea what this was about. Ryan made the calls, and once the 3 women arrived, he hurried downstairs with me to the parking garage. Only after the car slowly pulled away from the hospital did I ask, Ryan, did number 3 bring the phone? He did. Ryan looked surprised. You really called it? That kid's pretty smart. Of course, I looked smug. You picked him, and I approved him. My judgment doesn't miss. Give me the phone. I've got something I need to contact him about today. Contact him? Ryan immediately seemed to realize something. You mean, exactly. I gave him a direct answer. He should be making his move now. The weather's getting colder. Somebody's finally managed to dig his own grave. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the drive. When we arrived at the Cooper residence, Michael Cooper and Robert Hayes were already sitting in the living room. The ashtray on the coffee table was overflowing with cigarette butts. Michael looked grim, and Robert didn't look any better. Dad, Uncle Robert. I walked over like a kid who knew he'd done something wrong, and stopped in front of them. I obediently pulled over a chair and sat down, waiting to be lectured. The 2 men exchanged a look, before finally deciding Michael should speak. You know about the thermal power plant in Changshan District, right? I nodded. Yeah, I know about it. The Changshan District Thermal Power Plant was a project launched in 2012. With funding from the municipal government to solve Shanghai City's shortage of electricity by constructing a new thermal power station. When the project was first established, no one expected that it would eventually trigger protests from local residents. The reason for the protests was simple. The plant didn't burn coal to generate electricity. It burned garbage. The thermal power plant was one of the pilot projects under the National Urban Household Waste Harmless Treatment Facility Construction Plan. For the 13th 5-year plan, construction was scheduled to begin in 2012 and finish in 2014, with power generation and grid connection beginning that same year to provide electricity for Shanghai City. Everything went smoothly at first. Construction was actually completed by the end of 2013. But just as the plant was about to officially begin operating, somehow rumors suddenly spread online claiming that burning garbage produced deadly toxins. That seriously threatened the public's physical and mental health. The situation escalated incredibly fast. The rumors appeared online in the morning, and by that afternoon, local residents were already protesting. By the next day, so-called support groups from all over the country had begun arriving, catching the Shanghai city government completely off guard. The reason I remembered the incident so clearly was partly because back then, people at our school had also been spreading propaganda about it and trying to encourage students to join the protests. The other reason was that my adoptive dad had been one of the officials leading the response at the time. Back then, their response strategy included public messaging to cool down the controversy, intercepting those outside support groups, negotiating with local residents and increasing compensation, and arresting a number of people who had spread false rumors online or taken the lead in organizing the protests. Robert had personally issued the orders for both the interceptions and the arrests. We stopped someone trying to file a petition today. Robert said. He was one of the people who led the protests back then, and one of the hardliners who refused to settle or accept any compensation. I had someone investigate him, and he's been receiving unexplained payments for the past few years. The largest one arrived the day before yesterday. Supposedly, it was compensation from a labor dispute, paid by a company after mediation. I looked at the man in the photograph and shook my head. The weather's getting colder. Some people need another layer. And some people are just desperate to die. Dad, lend me your car. I already knew exactly what was going on. Michael seemed to have expected this. He silently took out his car keys and placed them on the table. Ryan, let's go. Ryan was still a little stunned, but he could tell something was wrong. Even though he couldn't understand the deeper meaning behind everything, he had already begun to sense that among the 6 Carter sisters, someone was about to become the first one to truly be taken out of the game. The 2 of us left the room. Once outside, I didn't waste any more words. Go to the Carter estate and give Butler Wilson a message. Tell him when one meridian opens, all things begin to grow. He's a smart man. He'll know who that message is really meant for. What does that even mean? Ryan could tell this sounded like some kind of coded message, but he still couldn't fully understand it. Are we helping him? He absolutely hates the Carter family. No, I shook my head and patted Ryan on the shoulder. I'm just making a guess. There may be a blade coming that even they won't be able to stop. We don't know the full picture yet, so prepare for the worst. And Ryan, bring number 3 out with you. Where are we going? Ryan asked, surprised. Bin High District. I'll send you the location in a bit. My footsteps thudded heavily against the floor as I quickly headed downstairs toward Dad's car. I started it, backed out, set the navigation for Bin High District Public Security Bureau, and drove straight there. Then I picked up my phone and called a newly saved number. Ring, ring. After a short while, someone answered. Hello? Tyler? Deputy Director Joe's voice came through the phone, sounding a little lazy and tired. What made you think of calling your uncle today? Calling to ask about the case? Uncle Joe, I said cheerfully. Not at all. I just happened to have some free time today. I've been saying I'd treat you to a meal, but I never had the chance. So I figured today would be a good time. Dinner? Deputy Director Joe didn't sound particularly interested. I was just out on patrol. Really? I immediately cut in. Well, I just booked a table at a restaurant in Bin High District for some seasonal specialties. It'd be a real shame if you didn't come. Seasonal specialties? Deputy Director Joe instantly sounded much more awake. Oh, wow. You really know how to treat your elders. I just inspected the cafeteria, and honestly, the food lately hasn't been great. I was just thinking about getting something good to eat. And then you called. All right. Then I won't be polite. We're practically family. Why be polite? I laughed. I'll send you the location in a minute. I pulled over to the side of the road, opened the Kangaroo delivery app, and searched for well-known private restaurants in Bin High District. Then I filtered for places averaging over 300 yuan per person, and chose one called Song Dynasty Moonlight. I immediately ordered their most expensive private course menu, but didn't send the location to Director Joe just yet. I still had to drive there myself, and it would take at least another 40 minutes. Even though this was mutually beneficial, I couldn't make him wait impatiently. So I first sent Director Joe a voice message on WeChat, telling him I'd be there shortly. And that traffic was a little heavy, so I hoped he'd understand. Deputy Director Joe replied almost immediately, saying it was fine. Good food is worth waiting for. Drive safely. After receiving the message, I sent the location to Ryan as well, then continued driving toward the restaurant. After I'd covered nearly half the distance, I realized I would probably arrive early enough, so I finally sent the location to Director Joe. Not long after, I pulled up outside the private restaurant I'd reserved when I saw my own car already parked outside. I nodded. Good. Not bad. I got out and walked inside. There, I saw Ryan and number 3 waiting in the lobby. The moment they saw me, both immediately stood up. Boss. Number 3 hurried over first, speaking in his thick hometown accent, with a huge, bright grin on his face. He jogged over. Man, this place looks expensive. I've been around here before, but I've never eaten somewhere like this. Thanks, boss. Once you've made enough money, you can come whenever you want, without worrying about the bill. I smiled. But before that, I need to ask you something. When the second Carter sister came back, did anything happen? Like some kind of civil dispute? Number 3 thought carefully for a moment, then slapped his forehead. Boss, now that you mention it, when I went back, I did see something like that on the surveillance footage. As he spoke, he pulled out his phone. It was the new phone Ryan had given him, and it already contained the surveillance video from when Hannah returned. I had to admit, the Carter estate's surveillance system was excellent. The video was crystal clear, and the audio was equally sharp. Everything that happened on the day she returned had been captured perfectly. Heh, I sneered. So it really was Hannah. What? Ryan still couldn't see the connection. Remember the power plant incident? I narrowed my eyes. Negative stories appeared online in the morning. People started holding protest banners that afternoon, and by the next day, supporters from other provinces had already arrived. Within 3 days, it had become a full-blown online controversy. combined with a real-world protest movement. Everything converged rapidly, and the momentum became enormous. Yeah, as someone who had experienced it firsthand, Ryan sounded nostalgic. I remember people in our class talking about it too. Back then, it almost felt like if you didn't say something or join the protest, you were in the wrong. I think I even got mad at my dad over that whole thing. Exactly, I sneered. I also remember there was a law firm that became famous because of that incident. Do you remember what it was called? But, Ryan thought for a moment. I think it was called Dawn Law Firm. My dad has friends at the courthouse, and they said that firm is pretty famous now. Lots of people go to them for representation and legal advice. Exactly. I pulled out my phone and opened Hannah's Baidu Baiki page. Did you know that after she came back, she started working at that exact law firm? Ryan leaned closer and looked. The profile clearly listed Dawn Law Firm. Right there. He still couldn't understand what the problem was, so he shook his head. So what? Idiot. I shook my head helplessly. But that's fine, as long as someone here isn't an idiot. Oh, look at this. Just then, Deputy Director Ju walked in wearing casual clothes. His eyes first landed on me, then swept over Ryan and number 3. He laughed heartily. Ryan's here too? We're doing business together, I said with a cheerful smile, as I brought Ryan and number 3 over. Sorry I couldn't message you while I was driving. I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long. It's fine. Deputy Director Joe smiled, his tired expression immediately turning more relaxed. Safety comes first. If you're driving, don't send messages unless you absolutely have to. Then his gaze shifted toward number 3. He's my bodyguard, I introduced him. Right now, I've stationed him in the Carter Estate's security control room. I wanted to get some experience first, and learn the basic procedures. Once my company is fully up and running, I'll bring him over to manage my security department. Deputy Director Joe nodded, and looked number 3 up and down, before praising him. Looks like a solid young man. Work hard for Tyler from now on. The food should be ready. I said, let's head upstairs and talk while we eat. The group laughed and quickly went up to the second floor and entered the private room. Sure enough, 3 cold dishes and 3 hot dishes had already been placed on the table after seating Deputy Director Joe in the place of honor. The rest of us hadn't even sat down yet when he said, I've been looking forward to these seasonal dishes for a long time. Last time, because of that Carter family situation, I never got to eat them. So this time, I'm curious to see how good they really are. They're definitely worth it, I said with a grin, and there's one dish that's especially huge. As I spoke, several servers came in surrounding something. Deputy Director Joe looked more closely and saw several people pushing a small serving cart. On the cart sat an enormous platter. It was so large that 3 people had to work together just to place it safely on the table. The portion itself was equally massive. It was a soup-based dish, similar to Sichuan boiled fish, with a whole fish in the center and a ring of vegetables arranged around it, all of them seasonal produce. The broth nearly covered everything, with only a few tips sticking above the surface. That's too much, Deputy Director Joe pointed at the dish. Are restaurants really this wasteful now? That platter alone is enormous, and there's barely anything in it. That's just how it looks. I pointed at the dish. This one's called sea swallow and greens. From the top, it looks like there's hardly anything there. But once you dig in with your chopsticks, it's packed underneath. Forget just the few of us. You could take the leftovers back and still have enough to feed plenty of people at the precinct. Oh, Deputy Director Joe's eyes lit up. He picked up his chopsticks. Then I won't hold back. Why would you? I smiled. We're practically family. Come on, everyone, eat. With that, I started urging everyone to dig in. As expected from an upscale restaurant, the dishes looked great and tasted just as good. After we'd eaten for a while, I finally said, oh, right, when I went home today, I saw Dad and Uncle Robert talking. They seemed pretty worried about some petition case. After saying that, I glanced at Ryan. He reacted as though he'd only just remembered. Oh, right. I heard my dad mention that today, too. Something about a case where someone received money from a labor dispute and then went to file a petition afterward. Could it be that case? Just then, number 3, who had been eating with his head down, suddenly looked up. I don't really know, but when the Carter family's second daughter came back, I heard her telling one of her assistants something about settling a case and getting some kind of... Anyway, she said the money could be obtained really quickly and that they needed to communicate with the plaintiff or something. Just eat your food. I immediately snapped at him. What's that got to do with you? The second daughter is a lawyer. It's perfectly normal for her to handle a case while she's back. At that, Deputy Director Zhou's eyes brightened even more. But it still seemed like one piece was missing. I sighed as well. It sounds like it might still be connected to that Chongshan District power plant incident from years ago. Don't you think that whole thing was strange? It felt like everything suddenly happened all at once. So fast, no one could even keep track of it. As I spoke in front of Deputy Director Zhou, I reached into the seasonal dish and picked up a large portion of vegetables and fish. Come to think of it, I heard Trump may be cutting some overseas funding lately. And over in District 11, some province is apparently planning to increase foreign funding. I saw people talking about it online. They seem to really like funding. All kinds of nonprofit organizations, legal professionals, artists, and cultural workers. Surely none of that money could be reaching people around here, right? Deputy Director Zhou's expression became rather interesting, but he quickly returned to normal. He picked up another bite of food and said, "There's way too much food today. One person could never finish all this. Can I pack some up and take it back?" "Of course," I smiled. "Absolutely." Deputy Director Zhou immediately broke into a broad smile. "Look at me, eating your food and taking leftovers home too. I'm almost embarrassed." "Not at all," I quickly replied. "I actually invited you to dinner because I have a small favor to ask. You're familiar with the courts, right? Do they have any jade or emerald coming up for judicial auction? I'm looking to buy some. And the more, the better. This is your last chance." Chloe was at home eating snacks and watching a movie when she suddenly noticed that her phone had received a new friend request on WeChat recently after I'd gotten her arrested and she'd been released. Her company had ordered her to keep a low profile for a while. They told her not to post anything on social media, including Moments or Weibo, and not to update her accounts at all. The excuse her company had prepared for the public was that she was undergoing intensive closed-door training. Fortunately, the incident had been settled, and the police had never released an official statement, nor had anyone recorded a video at the scene, though as long as she stayed quiet for a while, it supposedly wouldn't affect her comeback too badly. Of course, wouldn't affect her too badly was nothing more than reassurance. In reality, an invisible ceiling had already been placed over her career. Chloe had been in the entertainment industry long enough that she wasn't completely brainless, at least when something directly affected her own interests. She still had some common sense. Her manager had torn into her viciously. More than a dozen endorsement deals that were nearly finalized had fallen apart, and she'd effectively been put on temporary hiatus. Even an idiot would understand how badly she'd screwed up. Her career would be difficult even as she came back later. So Chloe had been unusually quiet lately. She contacted no one, posted nothing on Moments, and nothing on Weibo. She simply stayed quietly at home, waiting for the scandal to blow over, and praying that she'd still be able to make a living in entertainment someday. Instead of becoming completely useless to the family and being married off as nothing more than a tool for an alliance. But the moment she picked up her phone, she saw the friend request. And when she saw my name, her expression immediately froze. Her first instinct was to reject it, but the words, "last chance," forced her to stop herself. A chance. That was exactly what she needed more than anything right now. After hesitating for a moment, she accepted the request. Before she could even finish typing, I sent her a short video. She didn't even need to open it. The preview alone told her exactly what it was. That incident. He knew. I still had a copy of the recording. The entire reason she'd asked her second sister for help was to get that video deleted. "Dear fifth sister, you wouldn't want this showing up online, would you? I'll be waiting at the Guoben Hotel in the Old District." Those few short lines made Chloe furious. The threat was obvious enough, but somehow it also gave her an extremely disturbing feeling about what I might be planning. Before she could even lose her temper, another message from me arrived. "Come alone and act normal. Make up your own excuse. 2 hours. If you're late, the offer expires." "You bastard. You're such a bastard." Chloe cursed me furiously in her head. "How did Mom and Dad give birth to someone like you? What the hell does he want? What is this bastard planning? Her heart pounded with alarm. She cursed me every way she could think of. But there was absolutely nothing she could do. Her manager had made things perfectly clear. No matter what it took, there was only one rule. That video absolutely could not appear online. Otherwise, she'd be facing enormous contract penalties. So, for the sake of her future, she had no choice. But what if I was planning something completely inappropriate with my own sister? She had no idea. Her mind was a complete mess. Chloe mechanically did her makeup, put on sunglasses and a mask, and got into her private car. Fortunately, no one else was home today. Even her assistant wasn't there. Unfortunately, that also meant she didn't have a single person she could discuss this with. Though before long, she'd be grateful that no one had been home, and even more grateful that she'd had no one to consult. 2 hours from Binhai Manor to the Guoban Hotel. I'd calculated the timing perfectly, even accounting for the possibility of mild traffic. Along the way, when I saw my fifth sister walk into the lobby wrapped up so tightly she practically looked like a mummy, I immediately stood up. I'd already been waiting for a short while. I gave her a look, then walked into the private dining room I'd reserved. Chloe sat stiffly across from me. There were only 6 dishes on the enormous round table. All 6 of them cold appetizers. Neither of us showed any intention of touching our chopsticks. Let's get straight to the point. I placed my phone on the table, then took out an SD card. I won't destroy these. I'm keeping them, and I'll always be able to use them against you. Because I don't trust you. What the hell do you want? Chloe immediately exploded. She nearly slammed the table and started screaming, but then remembered the 6 slaps she'd given me. They felt satisfying at the time, but they'd also landed her in her current situation. So she forced herself to hold back. Fine, finish talking. I said, you can contact your manager and tell her I'm willing to cooperate with you on a public reconciliation. It doesn't even have to be called reconciliation. Whatever kind of story your team thinks will work, I'll cooperate. And as for this whole incident, I already had someone use their connections to make sure it was never formally entered into the record. The police don't actually have anything substantial on file either. Really? Chloe stared at me in disbelief. Of course, I nodded. So what do you want me to do? Although Chloe was shocked, her heart immediately sank. She knew perfectly well that the young man sitting across from her wasn't someone who made concessions for free. If I was willing to do this much for her, then I undoubtedly wanted something from her in return. Hannah Carter, I said, you're part of the Carter family. I want to know whether, when Hannah was interning at Dawn Law Firm, she ever made certain phone calls, and whether the people she spoke with used English, Japanese, or some other foreign language. English? Chloe looked confused. She didn't quite understand what I was getting at, but she still thought carefully. No, I don't remember that. Wait, I do remember hearing her speak Korean before. We asked her about it, and she said she traveled to South Korea, and even interned there for a while during college. She said having overseas legal internship experience would make it easier to find a good job after coming home. South Korea? I said in disbelief. In my previous life, I remembered that country well enough. It had also been one of the more aggressive anti-China players, though in earlier years, most of the conflict had centered around cultural appropriation and disputes over cultural ownership. Later, as the trade war escalated and international tensions intensified, their position gradually became much harder. There had been cases of paying cultural figures, lawyers and others to praise certain narratives and stir up trouble. But I had always thought Japan and the United States were the main players. I hadn't expected South Korea to be involved too. That was almost insulting. I didn't bother hiding my contempt. I can at least understand someone selling themselves to the United States. But doing it for South Korea? At that point, this idiot shouldn't even be considered family anymore. Just remove her name from the family registry. Chloe looked even more confused by what I was saying. What are you talking about? I'll just tell you directly. I pushed a small plastic bag across the table toward Chloe. These are listening devices. There are 16 of them. I've already installed the batteries. They can operate for about 6 months. What you need to do is place them in your second sister's room, her study, bedroom, bathroom, basically anywhere she spends a lot of time. And this. I pushed another small object toward her, an elegant-looking phone case. This phone case has been modified. There's a listening device and tracker built inside. Put it on your second sister's phone. You! Chloe's eyes widened in disbelief. Hannah is involved with foreign forces. Only then did I pick up my chopsticks and take a bite. Actually, involved may be too cautious. She probably is working with foreign forces, spreading rumors, stirring people up, and interfering with the progress of a major national project, causing serious losses to the country. My adoptive dad and Ryan's dad came to see me. They've already bought me some time. Now, the Carter family has two choices. Lose a huge chunk of its assets or get wiped out completely. Chloe's mind couldn't quite process it. You're helping the Carter family? But your adoptive dad, don't you all hate us? I lightly waved my chopsticks. What a useless emotion. Have you never heard the principle of acting when it benefits you and stopping when it doesn't? History has proved it countless times. Only people who understand interests and recognize the real point of conflict survive to the end. My adoptive dad told me. Someone has their eyes on the Carter family. They may be planning to use your sister and this latest petition incident as an excuse to carve up your family. Your sister Hannah used a labor dispute to funnel money to someone who had been a minor participant in the Chongshan power plant incident and sent him forward to cause trouble as a way of putting pressure on my adoptive dad and Uncle Robert. But she forgot that he's also someone else's pawn. The moment that man reaches the capital, he'll be arrested. Then they'll uncover his connections with foreign forces. And after that, the investigation could easily spread to the entire Carter family. You won't escape untouched either. I spoke with absolute certainty. As far as I'm concerned, my brother shares the same bloodline as all of you, which means he has the right to inherit the Carter family's assets with that much money at stake, rather than letting outsiders carve it up. I'd rather leave it sitting there until I'm ready to take it. What you need to do now is stand up on behalf of the Carter family and expose this. And if you do, I guarantee the police will let your previous incident go, as if it never happened. Everything I'm holding over you will disappear too. Your career in entertainment will move to a whole new level. And if you refuse, you don't seriously think that once the Carter family collapses, you'll somehow walk away clean, do you? So choose between your career and your family. Or your sister. After saying that, I took another sip of tea. Then something suddenly occurred to me. Originally, I was planning to use Grace as an inside contact, but I didn't expect Hannah to be this eager to destroy herself. So now I'm choosing you instead. You won't have much time. The people on our side have already intercepted that man once and cut off all of his outside communication. I think you'll have at least 24 hours to decide and take action. This is your last chance. Once that window passes, there's no telling what'll happen. My dad and Uncle Robert can't completely block that man's route forever. So make your decision quickly. With that, I stood up. Oh, right. The local police are investigating this too. They'll probably begin quietly investigating Hannah and the entire Dawn law firm very soon. Chloe froze. She still didn't understand all the connections involved. But if everything I said was true, then she couldn't help asking, why don't you report her yourself? I gave my hopeless sister a contemptuous look. You really are unbelievably stupid. Because my last name is Cooper. And because Dad has already met your brilliant second sister. When Chloe returned home, she happened to see Hannah arriving at the same time. The moment she got out of the car, she saw her second sister on the phone, speaking entirely in Korean that Chloe couldn't understand. Her tone sounded unusually enthusiastic. 안녕하세요. A string of Korean followed, ending with another cheerful phrase Chloe couldn't make out. When Hannah noticed Chloe had returned too, she said what sounded like a quick goodbye and ended the call. Then she asked, suspiciously, didn't your manager tell you not to go wandering around these next few days? Why did you sneak out again? That tone again. Resentment immediately rose in Chloe's heart. People said an older sister could be like a mother, but having too many mothers in the house wasn't exactly a blessing. Her second sister had always carried herself with authority. In the past, no one questioned it because Hannah had been the perfect student, the kind who could get into an elite high school without the family spending a cent. Then enter a prestigious university. She was the model child every other family talked about, the example everyone was told to follow. Their parents constantly reminded her to help them shoulder the responsibility of teaching her younger sisters and brother. So in front of all the younger siblings, Hannah acted almost like a second parent. Sometimes, she barely even respected their oldest sister, and would directly order her around too. In Hannah's mind, Grandpa ranked highest, then Mom and Dad, then herself. Every younger sister and brother beneath her was someone she could discipline whenever she wanted. She had even always believed that while her younger sisters might dare rebel against their parents, they were as obedient as rabbits around her. One look from her was usually enough to shut them down, but Hannah had never understood one thing. Love never appeared for no reason, and hatred never vanished without cause. It wasn't that her sisters had never gone through rebellious phases. They had simply swallowed all of it whenever Hannah was around. Because they were afraid of being hit. Because Hannah really was outstanding. And because everyone who had ever challenged her had failed. But once someone finally succeeded in challenging her, all the authority she'd built in front of her younger sisters would begin collapsing instantly. After watching Hannah get humiliated by me, the image Chloe had once held in her heart of her second sister as an untouchable authority began to crack. And what followed naturally was resentment toward the sister who had always controlled her more harshly than their parents, hit her harder than their parents ever had, and scolded her more viciously than either of them. Even so, I can't stay locked in the house every single day. By this point, Chloe had already made her final decision. Her acting instincts kicked in instantly, and she immediately put on the familiar expression of someone annoyed but unwilling to show it, while still trying to please her older sister. I was going crazy from boredom at home, so I just went out for a little while. Don't worry. No one saw me this time. Look, I even bought you a phone case. She immediately pulled the phone case from her bag. It's custom made. You can't find another one like it anywhere. She held it out like she was presenting a treasure. Hannah glanced at it and clearly seemed tempted. There wasn't even any packaging, and the design clearly looked carefully thought out. Hannah had always been fiercely ambitious and dreamed of becoming the kind of powerful, independent woman who controlled her own life. She cared deeply about her career, and even the clothes and accessories she chose usually leaned toward that polished, commanding businesswoman style. This phone case seemed to hit her tastes perfectly. Its main color was black, with a red cat design engraved across it. The dark body and red accents gave it an aggressive edge, while still retaining a hint of cuteness. It really looked as though it had been designed specifically for a career-driven woman like her, especially the cat on it, which happened to be one of her favorite cartoon characters. Not bad. Hannah didn't suspect anything. She immediately took it and put it on her Pair 12 Max. It makes my phone look completely different. That was thoughtful of you. Hannah smiled and nodded. Don't worry. Your problem will be resolved very soon. That little bastard will come crawling back to us before long. And apologize. Then I really have to thank you, Hannah. Chloe looked delighted, but deep down she seemed even happier. Yes, everything was finally in place. Her career, her future, really did depend on this wonderful sister of hers now. Hannah strode forward, carrying herself like the true head of the household, and stepped into the elevator first. For a while, both I and the Carter family seemed to enter a stalemate. Every day, I went to the hospital to check on Emma, then stopped by my factory. According to schedule, the time was almost here. The first batch of electric motorcycles was about to hit the market. They basically met all my requirements, except for one problem that wasn't exactly huge, but wasn't minor either. Their range was a little too short. At the moment, the first batch of my electric motorcycles had fairly limited range. Under ideal conditions, they could travel about 25 kilometers. They used lead-acid batteries, rated for roughly 300 charge cycles, giving them a total lifetime range of a little over 12,000 kilometers. And only now did I discover another reason electric motorcycles in this world had never reached the level of popularity they had in my previous life. Charging station regulations. The fire risk I'd been worried about had actually happened before. I wasn't the first person to think along these lines. Someone had already tried it, and a fire had happened. Sometime around 2006, there had been an incident where someone pushed a similar vehicle inside their home to charge it, and it started a fire. The flames spread violently, quickly igniting everything else in the house, including piles of firecrackers and toys they'd bought for the children. It had happened just after Lunar New Year's Eve. Late at night, with the doors locked from the inside, the family's two elderly parents, their oldest son, his wife and oldest grandson, their second son and his wife, the second son's two daughters, and one son. A family of 10, all died in the fire. So that same year, the government issued regulations, banning this kind of vehicle from being charged inside homes. In 2008, another regulation was introduced, requiring dedicated charging stations. In 2012, the rules tightened again. Now, my product was stuck on exactly that problem. I designed the electric motorcycle based on what I remembered from my previous life, and also followed that same logic, by making it compatible with ordinary household electricity. So it could be charged at home. But now, Engineer Lee. I looked at Engineer Lee in the design lab and asked, if we want regulatory approval, do we absolutely need a charging station? Yes. Engineer Lee nodded, giving me a clear answer. Are there specific requirements for the charging station? I asked again. Well, Engineer Lee took out a charging station design guideline. There actually aren't any very specific requirements. Basically, you just need to have a charging station. Not every single vehicle has to come with its own charging station. But there isn't a unified standard right now. So every company's charging equipment is different. The current and voltage standards vary too, which means with electric motorcycles, even if someone already has an electric vehicle at home, from the same brand, the electric car and the electric motorcycle might still use completely different standards, forcing them to install two separate charging stations. Never mind mixing different brands. I see. I thought for a moment, then could we design a portable charging station? Portable? Engineer Lee stared at me. Can a charging station even be portable? Of course. I smiled and sketched something on a sheet of scrap paper. Look, something roughly like this. Isn't that just a power strip? Engineer Lee froze. The corner of his mouth twitched. And one of those retractable extension reels? Just make it more refined. I tapped the design guideline. Make the cable longer. We don't need a bunch of outlets. Just one 3-prong socket. Design the casing so the cable can retract automatically, then add a voltage regulator or whatever else is needed. Basically, everything recommended in this document should be included. Make sure it satisfies all the basic technical requirements. But, at its core, it's still just an extension cord. One that can run directly from inside the house. About 15 meters long should be enough. Engineer Lee stared at me wide-eyed. That actually works? The guideline never says the charging station has to be permanently fixed in place. I spread my hands. As for getting it approved, leave that part to me. I'm not letting my investment get stuck at the final hurdle. The design itself wasn't difficult, and it wouldn't add much cost. A compatible unit could be produced quickly. Then Engineer Lee thought about the background of his young boss. At least locally, approval definitely wouldn't be a problem. With that in mind, he stopped arguing. Just then, Ryan suddenly rushed inside, completely ignoring the fact that Engineer Lee was still there. His face could barely contain his excitement. It's happening! It's happening! What's happening? I glared at Ryan. Aren't you supposed to be at the Carter estate today? Why are you here? Of course it's... Ryan glanced at Engineer Lee. Engineer Lee immediately understood and quietly stepped outside. Bird, gulp, gulp. Ryan grabbed the unopened Coke sitting on the table, cracked it open and took a huge drink. Man, that's good. The police came, did you hear? Ryan was grinning from ear to ear. Yesterday, the Carter family's 5th daughter made an anonymous report to the precinct, accusing her sister of being a spy. She even submitted a recording of a phone call. Today, the precinct finally made its move. They went straight to the Carter estate and arrested Hannah, and I heard it was a coordinated operation. At Dawn Law Firm, aside from one person who was away on a business trip, everyone else, including the founder, several senior executives, and multiple attorneys, was arrested. I also heard they're investigating their bank records and personal assets, and they've already found a lot of money coming in from overseas. I remained completely calm and grabbed a can, Coke, for myself. You don't look very happy. Ryan sounded confused. What's there to be happy about? I asked in return. I expected this from the beginning. So why would I be excited? Are you worried Grandpa Carter will get her out? Jack, didn't you send Grandpa Carter that message? Wasn't that supposed to mean he should save her? Save her? I rolled my eyes at Ryan. You grew up in a police family. How can you still be this clueless? If Hannah really participated in the Changshan power plant incident back then and took money to do it, then the charges she could face could include inciting subversion of state power under Article 1005 of the criminal law if she accepted foreign funding and incited people to resist national policy. Then, depending on the circumstances, she could start at 5 years, and in the most serious case, face the death penalty. If she also funded people involved in the unrest back then, especially that man, who was intercepted while trying to petition this time, then she could also be charged with funding criminal activities that endanger national security. Under Article 27, that could mean less than 5 years, or more than 5 years depending on the severity, and the protests back then erupted almost overnight. If she participated in organizing or planning them, then she could also face charges for provoking disturbances under Article 293 of the criminal law. That could mean up to 5 years in prison, or criminal detention. Since it involved protests and demonstrations, she could also face charges of unlawful assembly, procession, or demonstration under Article 296 of the criminal law, depending on the circumstances. That could mean up to 5 years in prison or deprivation of political rights. And finally, if actual espionage activity is uncovered, she could be convicted of espionage under Article 110 of the criminal law. That carries a sentence of at least 10 years, possibly even life imprisonment. I sneered. Either way, this sister of mine isn't getting out for at least 10 or 20 years. Grandpa Carter has no choice except to distance the family from her as quickly as possible. But that's not the important part. The important part is, I think the two of us just became useful pawns for a moment and ended up prying open Jianghai City's entire political establishment. According to the national security law and other relevant laws and regulations, the relevant authorities conducted a lawful investigation. Dawn Law Firm was suspected of accepting foreign funding. Sunrise Group issued a public statement stating that the group's president, Robert Carter, had no knowledge of his daughter's crimes, and that both he personally and the group had always obeyed the law. The statement expressed deep regret over the incident and announced his resignation as company president. During this incident, the Binhai District Public Security Bureau acted immediately after receiving the report and rapidly launched interviews and an investigation. The Binhai District Bureau demonstrated an extremely high level of vigilance and acted decisively. After review by the Shanghai Municipal Public Security Bureau and the Shanghai Municipal Party Committee, the following personnel were officially commended: Comrade Zhou Wuyi, Comrade Wang Maiping, Comrade Song Zhongyi. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs strongly condemned South Korea's funding and obstruction of the normal construction of Shanghai City's Changshan thermal power plant and issued a strong statement of condemnation. The central authorities opened an investigation into the Changshan District Waste Incineration Plant incident and began a formal inquiry, issuing the following directives. The director of the Binhai District Public Security Bureau, Soto, was found to have accepted enormous bribes during inspection operations. The head of the organization department of the Municipal Public Security Bureau, Batiru, had been seduced by a foreign intelligence operative during inspection operations and, while supposedly learning a foreign language from her, had repeatedly provided important information. The Municipal Public Security Bureau launched an internal review in response to the recent incidents. At the internal review conference, the deputy director of the Guangyan Provincial Public Security Department and head of the Shanghai Municipal Public Security Bureau, Robert Hayes, delivered a stern speech, ordering every unit and department to conduct rigorous self-examinations, with every individual required to pass review. Investigators found that Guangnan Provincial Deputy Party Secretary William Wu, Jianghai Supreme Court President Kevin Shang, Jianghai Municipal Party Secretary George Jing, and others had knowingly concealed information in the case and committed serious disciplinary and legal violations, including accepting bribes. According to information uncovered by netizens, the person who reported the case to police and provided both leads and evidence, was connected to Sunrise Group, specifically the fifth daughter of former President Robert Carter. Chloe Carter posted on Weibo, "I'm personally devastated by what my sister has done. As a citizen of this country, how could anyone do something like this?" After learning the truth, I completely broke down. The rest of the post continued at length, explaining why she ultimately chose to put justice before family. The police reposted Chloe Carter's Weibo statement, "Protecting national security is everyone's responsibility. We deeply regret the crimes committed by Ms. Carter's sister, and we also commend Ms. Carter for proactively reporting the matter and providing evidence. Her actions deserve recognition." The Shanghai city government's official Weibo account reposted Chloe Carter's statement, "A model of justice, an exemplary citizen who upholds what is right. Together we safeguard peace and defend the law with sincerity." Ever since Hannah Carter's arrest, Shanghai City's entire political establishment had been shaken to its core. I realized that my adoptive dad and Uncle Robert probably hadn't merely been warning me that an outside blade was flying in to harvest the Carter family. They had likely wanted me to use this opportunity to accomplish something else as well, something connected to the political establishment. At first, I'd assumed they simply wanted me to hand Deputy Director Joe a legitimate achievement, and then have Uncle Robert promote one of his own people. But I never expected that I would end up becoming the crowbar that pried open almost the entire Shanghai political establishment and caused such an enormous upheaval. At the breakfast table, I ate. While listening to the news my adoptive dad had turned on, the corner of my mouth twitched. "Dad, next time you want to use your son as a knife, could you at least make it a little more obvious?" A knife? Michael looked as though he genuinely had no idea what I meant. "What knife? You don't seriously think an ordinary retired old man like me could have that kind of influence, do you?" "Ordinary?" I complained silently in my head, but didn't dare say it out loud. Speaking of which, Michael suddenly seemed to remember something. "Your little private fortune barely survived this time. If it happens again, you won't be this lucky." I fell silent. Too fat and too stupid. Michael shook his head. It was practically a piece of ownerless pork just waiting to be carved up. I was about to stand up, when Michael suddenly added, "The new municipal party secretary was a classmate of mine back in college. Once he arrives, I'll see if I can find time to catch up with him." "Oh?" I nodded. Got it. Today I'm going to..." I was just about to explain my plans when my phone suddenly started ringing. I saw that it was Ryan calling, so I immediately put him on speaker. "Bro, your wife is gone." At the breakfast table, Bo's dad and I froze at the same time. "What the hell? Gone?" Alarm shot through me. "What do you mean?" "What does gone mean? Explain clearly." "I mean, she's gone. On the phone." Ryan sounded frantic. "Didn't you tell me to pick up my future sister-in-law today?" When I got there, I found Sophia and Natalie passed out outside. I knew something was wrong, so I rushed inside, and both Emma and Grace were gone. "What?" A terrible feeling immediately hit me. Sophia, Natalie, and Grace were all extremely responsible people. Sophia and Natalie took turns sleeping during night watch, so one of them was always awake. They hadn't slacked off once these past few days. How could something like this suddenly happen? "Call the police," I snapped. "Have you reported it yet?" "Check the hospital surveillance footage too." "The police?" "But it hasn't been 24 hours. Ryan had barely started speaking when I exploded. "Are you out of your mind? Your dad is literally a cop, and you're still believing garbage from clickbait accounts?" According to the joint guidance issued by the Supreme People's Court, the Supreme People's Procuratorate, the Ministry of Public Security, and the Ministry of Justice on punishing the trafficking of women and children according to law. Article 8 specifically states that under certain circumstances, when a woman over the age of 18 goes missing, and there is reason to believe she may have been trafficked, once jurisdiction is confirmed, the public security authorities must immediately open a criminal case and begin investigating. That so-called 24-hour rule isn't mandatory. Both Emma and Grace meet those conditions. You don't need to wait 24 hours. And your last name is Hayes, as in Robert Hayes. If you go report this, what idiot wouldn't take it seriously? Oh, Ryan finally seemed to realize it. Read more books from now on. And stop believing clickbait accounts. I said through gritted teeth. Why? Report it right now. Stay there and wait for the police to arrive. I'm coming immediately. The car keys are. Michael had just started telling me where the keys were. Dad, I remember Uncle Robert confiscated my motorcycle keys last time. I asked, where did he put them? First drawer above the shoe cabinet inside the metal box. Michael replied, okay, I finished my porridge in one gulp. Put down my bowl and chopsticks. I'm leaving. The motorcycle will be faster. Traffic jams won't slow it down nearly as much. And Emma's disappearance suddenly made me realize something. At night, I'd asked her who had told her all those things, why they'd told her to hide them, and how they'd helped change her recorded birth date. Emma herself hadn't been able to answer. Then so many other things happened afterward that I stopped thinking about it. But now that I reconsidered it, if someone else knew all of this, then that person might also be a cultivator. And judging by the plots of cultivation novels, had I stumbled into some kind of raised cauldron scenario? Had Emma been deliberately raised by a person or organization until the moment came to harvest her, only for me to get there first, even though I hadn't actually done anything with her yet? If that really was the case, I clenched my teeth and immediately called Ryan again. The moment he answered, I asked, are Sophia and Natalie still at the scene? Yes, Ryan quickly replied. Tell them to go buy me some large sheets of paper, cinnabar, calligraphy brushes, an incense burner, a seal, silver powder, and 5 colored thread. I immediately started giving orders. Ryan sounded caught off guard. Where am I supposed to find all that stuff? I didn't care, I replied without any hesitation. I just left home. By the time I reach the hospital, I need to see those materials waiting for me. How you get them is your problem. I just need the supplies. If cultivators really were involved, then I had to prepare in advance. Even if it meant scrambling at the last possible second, I still had to try. I pushed the motorcycle out of the parking shed. Ryan had already filled the tank for me. I kicked it to life and headed for the hospital, riding right at the maximum legal speed. When I arrived and went upstairs, I saw Ryan and a police officer inside the hospital room. The materials I'd asked for were scattered across the bed. Ryan scratched his head. This stuff was seriously hard to find. I nodded, then looked toward the officer, and immediately froze. Officer Song? He just happened to be patrolling around here too? No way. He'd been there during the Carter Estate incident. He'd also been there during the Fifth Sisters case. And now he was here again? This guy's patrol area seemed suspiciously huge. No, Officer Song replied. Didn't that disturbance happen here yesterday? To prevent anything similar from happening again, they reassigned some officers here as extra security. That way, if anything happens, we can respond immediately. Oh, I drew the word out meaningfully, but didn't say anything else. Then this definitely wasn't the work of ordinary people. There was no point overthinking it. I asked directly. The surveillance footage probably won't make identifying them easy. And Sophia and Natalie can't explain why they suddenly fell asleep. Right. Officer Song nodded. From the footage, the other side was very careful. They must have scouted the hospital beforehand, because they avoided most of the cameras. Only the cameras they absolutely couldn't avoid caught anything. And even then, they were wearing face coverings and oversized clothing that concealed their builds. Officer Song seemed to remember something else. And the strangest part is, their clothes should have made them stand out. We even saw them pass several nurses on duty. But none of the nurses can clearly remember them. Just as I thought, my expression darkened. That sounds like the effect of an obscuring talisman. An obscuring talisman? Officer Song looked completely baffled. But he couldn't exactly argue, because the two people seen on the surveillance footage really did look unnaturally strange. It's a type of talisman. I patted Officer Song on the shoulder. I have a feeling you might keep randomly patrolling into people like us in the future. So there's no harm in telling you ahead of time. This world may not be quite what you normally think it is. An obscuring talisman is a type of charm. My mentor in my dreams had told me about them. This thing had been developed in relatively modern times. Because spiritual energy had dried up, even low-level charms like true invisibility talismans had become far too expensive to waste casually. So cultivators who specialized in talismans developed this alternative. It couldn't make someone invisible. but it carried a mild hypnotic effect that caused ordinary people to overlook the wearer, or subconsciously assume that anyone carrying the talisman was unimportant and not worth remembering. Of course, what kind of talisman it wasn't the important part. What mattered was that in this era, talismans couldn't retain their effects for very long once created. They had to be used within a few hours. Otherwise, the spiritual energy would dissipate and the talisman would become useless. Which meant, if those two could use talismans, one thing was obvious. They had spirit stones on them. Officer Song didn't seem particularly surprised. There wasn't even the slightest ripple in his expression. That actually surprised me. Wait, wasn't this supposed to be like those novels? At a moment like this, someone like him, shouldn't he first refuse to believe me, then lecture me about trusting science, before I shocked him with some supernatural demonstration, and left him staring at me in awe? Why wasn't he reacting at all? Not bad, not bad. Impressive for someone so young. You already understand this kind of thing. Officer Song seemed to realize what I was thinking, and finally gave me some kind of reaction. It just wasn't the reaction I'd been expecting. Officer Song simply patted his own shoulder and said, "When I was little, my parents took me to Xijing. We went to Kung Fu Road. I think there was a temple of the 8 immortals around there. My parents took me inside, and we paid our respects to the immortals. We also had a Taoist priest read my fortune. Want to know what he told me?" I shook my head. How would I possibly know? He said I'd be free from illness and disaster until I turned 38. Officer Song sounded nostalgic. That I'd carry righteous energy. That I wouldn't be especially wealthy. But I would have some noble fortune. And that fortune would need to be activated by meeting a benefactor. After that, if I wanted to rise any further, I'd face one trial after another. But if I survived them, I'd climb another level. And before I turned 38, I wouldn't meet that benefactor. As he spoke, he patted his shoulder again. Well, I'm 38 this year. My oldest daughter is 10, and my youngest son is 8. I missed my chance while I was young, so now I'm grabbing the tail end of middle age and taking one last shot. I need money for my son's future wedding and a home. After hearing that, my eyes fell on Officer Song's shoulder insignia. I remembered that the first time I'd met him, he'd still been a third-class police inspector. Now, he was already a first-class police inspector. People like you are just relatively rare. Most of the time, you keep your abilities hidden. But people like you are also the ones most likely to encounter unusual things. So for officers like us, the odds of running into people like you are actually much higher than for ordinary civilians. After hearing that, I had no idea what to say. Fine. Reality really was pretty different from novels. Seeing Officer Song looking like he was absolutely determined to seize this chance for advancement, I could only laugh inwardly. Blocking a man's path to wealth was like killing his parents, especially when that man was fighting for his son's future wedding expenses and a home. All right, I nodded. Close the door. Let's prepare the ink. Officer Song immediately shut the door. Now, only 3 people remained inside. Me, Ryan, and Officer Song. Glanced at Ryan, who still had absolutely no sense of what needed doing, and sighed inwardly. Then I prepared the ink myself. I had no idea where they'd bought everything, but one look told me Sophia and Natalie had done most of the actual work. Ryan, really, wasn't easy to train. The yellow talisman paper was decent enough, but there was no silver powder. That was apparently impossible to find on short notice. The cinnabar and incense burner were all there, though. I arranged everything on the table, then lit 3 sticks of incense, and bowed respectfully 3 times. I, Tyler Cooper, first disciple of the 72nd generation of the Qingwei sect, apologize for these crude preparations. The situation is urgent. I ask the ancestral master for understanding. This disciple offers 3 sticks of incense, and begs forgiveness for any disrespect. My cultivation is weak, and my Tao companion has been abducted by villains. Please, ancestral master, lend me your aid. Then I bowed 3 more times. This wasn't actually required to draw talismans. My mentor in my dreams had simply told me that when doing things like alchemy or drawing talismans, it was customary to first pay respects to the ancestral master. If your heart was sincere and your luck was good, the ancestral master might respond and provide some unexpected benefit. That was why many cultivators prayed before making talismans. If they didn't know their own lineage, or had no ancestral master, they'd pray to other deities instead. Some people even prayed to dozens of different gods before drawing a single talisman. It only wasted a little time anyway. And if even one of them happened to respond, you came out ahead. Of course, praying to random deities wasn't as effective as praying to your own ancestral master. Your own ancestral master was far more likely to respond than some unrelated deity. After finishing the prayer, I centered myself once more, then picked up the brush. My hand moved rapidly across the talisman paper. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Complex patterns quickly appeared across the yellow paper. I'd barely finished the second stroke when Ryan frowned beside me. Can that really work? That looks terrible. He'd seen talismans online before, and although he couldn't understand them, he could at least tell the difference between beautiful and ugly. Be grateful I'm able to draw one at all. I knew perfectly well that I couldn't draw. The original owner of this body had practiced drawing talismans for 2 years. But because there had been no spiritual energy, he'd eventually given up. At least the basic patterns were still mostly correct. Being able to draw one now that was generally accurate was already pretty impressive. I stared at the talisman in my hand, my brows tightly furrowed. Could this thing be printed with a printer? The main materials at this stage were just yellow paper and cinnabar ink. So maybe a machine could replace the hand-drawing process too. Yeah, I can test that later. But for now, I rapidly formed a series of hand seals, then guided spiritual energy into the talisman. The ordinary yellow paper and red markings suddenly began to change, as though they had been infused with some kind of divine intent. The red lines on the talisman seemed to swim like living fish. It worked. I was extremely satisfied. Even though it was obviously far inferior to a truly high-quality talisman, I was a practical person. As long as it worked, that was enough. Icked the talisman between my index and middle fingers. Enchanted heaven and earth, take your positions. 8 trigrams, reveal your form. Yin and yang follow as one. 5 elements, answer my call. Let fate guide the way. Let the earth veins form the path. Track the soul and pursue the spirit. Let nothing escape. By sacred decree, act. For the first time, I saw an 8 trigrams diagram appear before my eyes. At its center, 2 yin-yang jade symbols slowly rotated clockwise, while the 8 trigrams around them revolved in the opposite direction. Then 2 phantom symbols flew out from the Qian and Li trigrams and entered the space between my brows. The ancestral master had answered me. My heart shook. According to what my mentor had taught me in my dreams, this meant a divination master had successfully connected with one of the 8 trigrams and could draw upon its power. Each trigram carried its own divine ability, which divination masters could use to protect themselves, but fully connecting with even one trigram was incredibly difficult. Even talented divination masters usually needed several years to master a single trigram. For someone like me to connect with 2 at once, either I had to be a once-in-history prodigy, or the ancestral master had personally intervened to help his disciple. So this really was the ancestral master's blessing. Ancestral master above, this disciple swears, I'll build a proper ancestral tablet at home and worship you every day. I silently promised. Then I moved my right hand. A strand of hair from the corner of the room suddenly floated into the air and flew into my palm. I brought both hands together, then pulled them apart. The talisman and the strand of hair began floating in midair on their own. The hair coiled around the talisman like a dragon winding around a pillar, and gradually began glowing gold. I pointed toward the window. The next second, the talisman and hair fused together and shot outside. I immediately closed my eyes and felt my mind connect with the talisman. In an instant, my perception crossed countless miles and arrived somewhere else. A vehicle was traveling along a road. Before I could get a good look at the surroundings, snap. Something struck like a massive blade and instantly severed my connection with the talisman. My eyes snapped open. It felt as though waves were crashing violently inside my chest. The discomfort was unbearable. I hurried into the bathroom. Gleg. Within seconds, my entire breakfast ended up in the toilet. How are you? Officer Song rushed in immediately. and patted my back as he asked. I'm fine, nothing serious. I shook my head. Good thing my technique is terrible. Otherwise, I would have suffered a much worse backlash. Luckily, I was only half-trained, and the talisman I'd created was awful. Someone had clearly detected it just now, and directly used a spell to destroy it, breaking my tracking talisman. This kind of tracking talisman followed the target through karmic connections, and carried a tiny fragment of the user's soul for reconnaissance. That allowed the user to see what was happening in real time. But the downside was that if the talisman was destroyed by an outside force, the user would suffer damage too. Fortunately, mine was bottom tier even among low-grade talismans. The fact that it had worked at all was thanks to the ancestral master's blessing, so it carried only a tiny fragment of my consciousness, which meant the backlash after it was destroyed was relatively minor. Otherwise, I'd probably be lying in a hospital bed myself right now. The thought alone made cold sweat break out across my back. This was my first time confronting someone with similar supernatural abilities, and the other side had clearly been prepared. The moment my talisman arrived, they destroyed it. I'd suffered because of my lack of experience, but I'd also simply been too stupid. I should have anticipated that the other side might have countermeasures. I need to be much more careful from now on. Your technique is terrible. Ryan arrived half a step later. Hearing my contradictory statement, he didn't even know how to respond. He could only ask, "Are you seriously okay? Do you need to rest? You were throwing up like crazy. I'll go buy you some porridge." No need, I steadied myself, and carefully recalled the scene I'd just seen. They're heading south in a silver van. Judging from the surroundings, they were already on the expressway. It looked like they'd just passed a toll station and were stuck in traffic. The traffic jam started almost immediately after entering the expressway, and stretched a long way. So if they're heading south from here, I pulled out my phone and opened navigation. My mind raced through the possibilities. What major city to the south required taking the expressway? Chongqing City. That was the first city that came to mind. It was one of Guangyan's southern gateway cities, and a major transportation hub for traffic heading farther south. I typed the city into the navigation app, selected driving directions, and immediately saw several possible routes to Chongqing City, all displayed on the screen. Then I narrowed the results. Sure enough, in Qiaonan District, the Qiaonan East Expressway entrance was marked with severe congestion. Just north of that entrance, where the road merged into the Outer Ring Expressway, a large truck had overturned, causing several vehicles to collide in a serious chain reaction accident. Traffic police were handling the scene, and the road was heavily congested. The navigation app temporarily advised drivers to avoid that route. That's it. I immediately started navigation. They're at the Qiaonan East Toll Station in Qiaonan District. They just passed through and were about to enter the expressway. But now they're stuck. What incredible luck. If that accident hadn't caused a traffic jam, they probably would have already made it out of Shanghai City. Thank you, Ancestral Master. I bowed once more toward the incense burner. I'm going ahead. I plan to take the motorcycle. At a time like this, a motorcycle was the best choice. I'm coming with you. Officer Song said, I've already reported the situation. With me there, a lot of things will be easier to handle. Meanwhile, inside a silver Jinbei van, a skinny man with a long face and protruding teeth sat behind the wheel. His body was thin, and overall, he looked almost like a human-sized rat. Taken care of, in the passenger seat, sat a fat man with a round face, small eyes, and a large belly. His voice was slightly muffled as he replied, just some worthless amateur. A talisman was sked between his fingers. If one looked closely, it was exactly the talisman I'd drawn. The fat man stared at it contemptuously, then casually crushed it into a ball, and tossed it out the window. For something this pathetic to actually work, some deity really must have answered his prayer. Just wonder which god took pity on him. The fat man's tone was openly mocking, and completely relaxed. Talismans like this, especially long-range ones, were similar in some ways to drones. They were remotely controlled, and used for reconnaissance or other tasks, but that also meant they shared similar weaknesses. For example, they were relatively easy to disrupt, or trick with false signals and capture. Simply put, the offensive and defensive methods used in electronic warfare were surprisingly similar to those used against long-range talismans. I was a complete beginner, This was my first time fighting another cultivator, and I had absolutely no experience. I'd never even thought to add anti-deception or anti-interference protections to my talisman, and since my drawing itself was terrible, the fat man had easily intercepted it, taken control of it, and captured it. Want to teach him a lesson? The skinny man asked. The mission comes first. He's just some third-rate talisman maker. He probably begged a deity for help and got lucky once. Not worth wasting our time on. The fat man shifted his heavy body. Let's hurry up and deliver the cargo to the boss. Once the job is finished, we can both relax. Ever since we took this assignment, my right eyelid hasn't stopped twitching. I've got a feeling this trip isn't going to go smoothly. The skinny man couldn't have cared less. Superstitious nonsense. What's supposed to go wrong? The only problem is that we're stuck in traffic on the expressway. If something bad were really going to happen, we would have been screwed already. These days, you've got to believe in science. That's just your eyelid twitching. As he spoke, the skinny man glanced toward the back, at the two unconscious women. A lewd look crossed his face as he said, "Which one of those two? Is the cargo our boss actually wants? What are you thinking?" The fat man didn't care at all as he replied, "Don't tell me you're hoping he'll let you have one. We're law-abiding citizens. We can't do anything illegal." The skinny man laughed and stopped talking, turning his full attention back to the traffic ahead. Then he suddenly started cursing. Damn it. Look at that idiot cutting in without even using a turn signal. What the hell is wrong with him? If I let you squeeze in, I'll take your last name. Being stuck in traffic was already enough to put anyone in a terrible mood. And in the instant he turned around, he hadn't noticed the car ahead move forward slightly. He'd only been delayed by a moment. But another car immediately turned its wheels and shoved half its front end into the gap. The skinny man instantly started swearing. The fat man closed his eyes and decided not to get involved, pretending he hadn't heard anything. A while passed like that, but the traffic still didn't move. Even the fat man started getting impatient. Kermit, the skinny man was still yelling at the driver who'd cut in. Enough. The fat man finally couldn't take it anymore. Just drive properly. The hell do you mean I'm not driving properly? That only made the skinny man even more worked up, and he kept ranting without stopping. But the next second, he suddenly noticed red and blue lights flashing in the rearview mirror. Police. The fat man's heart tightened. He slammed his elbow into the skinny man's side. Enough. There are cops. Cops? The skinny man immediately shut up. He checked the rearview mirror. And sure enough, emergency lights were flashing behind them. There seemed to be quite a few police vehicles, too. Have we been exposed? The skinny man asked nervously. When you destroyed that talisman earlier, are you sure the person controlling it didn't get a clear look at us? Shh, the fat man sneered. I'm a professional talisman practitioner with something as pathetic as that. It wouldn't have worked at all without some deity helping him. These days, gods are stingier than humans. I've made offerings to so many of them, burned so much incense, and given them so many offerings. I'm lucky if one of them responds even once. One look at that talisman technique and you can tell he came from some wild, unofficial lineage. We're both from unofficial lineages. That guy just got unbelievably lucky. Getting one divine response was already a miracle. What do you think? That some god is personally looking after his own disciples and descendants? And as for getting a clear look, with a talisman that ugly, if he could see anything clearly, I'd take his last name. The more the fat man talked, the angrier he became. He'd offered so much incense and worshipped so many gods. Every single time he'd been completely sincere, prostrating himself fully, and performing every ceremony with the utmost respect. Yet, those stingy gods wouldn't even give him a tiny blessing. They were both from unofficial cultivation backgrounds. So why did that third-rate talisman maker get a response, even if it was nothing but dumb luck? He was still jealous. Knock, knock, knock. While they were talking, a traffic officer walked over on foot and knocked on the passenger side window. Hello, hello. The fat man hurriedly rolled down the window and greeted him with a smile. Officer, is something wrong? We received a call asking for help. The traffic officer leaned in and glanced around the van. Before explaining, someone reported that a pregnant woman in a van was about to give birth. The caller's phone died, so we're checking vehicles one by one. He looked at the fat man, then glanced toward the back seats. His brows furrowed slightly, as if something felt a little strange. But he couldn't quite put his finger on it. "Sorry to bother you." The traffic officer smiled, saluted, and walked away. But just then, he suddenly noticed a crumpled piece of yellow paper near his feet, and casually picked it up. He unfolded it. "What's this?" He stared at the object, covered in messy, complicated markings, and couldn't understand any of it. "Is this yours?" No. The fat man hurriedly replied. "I don't even know what that thing is." "Really not yours?" The traffic officer gave them another look. People really have less and less respect these days. Throwing trash everywhere. "Sorry for bothering you." Then he continued walking forward. The fat man and skinny man both let out a long breath. They'd gotten through it. What they couldn't see was that after the traffic officer passed the car in front and turned around a corner out of their line of sight, he didn't go far. Instead, he unfolded the yellow paper, took out his phone, and snapped a picture, then sent it to the police work group chat. He wrote, "Found this beside a silver Jinbei van, and when I looked inside just now, his peak, something felt off. I didn't see any women, but I could smell shampoo, and it didn't smell like anything those two men would use. Should we list the van as a suspicious vehicle?" "Yes." A supervisor immediately replied in a group, "Send your location. Keep a close watch on the suspicious vehicle." Inside the van, the two men became somewhat quieter. Even the skinny man had lost his earlier mood. They both regularly handled shady jobs, and he could tell that the officer had seemed a little off. The excuse hadn't sounded quite right either. "Bro," the skinny man said darkly, "I think they're here for us. Did your talisman work just now?" "Of course." The fat man actually sounded more confident now. "That officer didn't have a trace of spiritual energy. He's just an ordinary person. There's no way he could see through it. And that talisman looked like a cat had clawed all over it. He couldn't make sense of that garbage anyway. Just drive properly. And stop letting people cut in." The van fell silent. About an hour later, the skinny man frowned. "Something's wrong. Why is our lane moving so slowly?" The cars in the neighboring lanes were moving forward, albeit slowly, while the cars in their lane had almost completely stopped. The skinny man started feeling uneasy. Moving slowly during a traffic jam was normal. Sometimes, one lane would suddenly start moving faster. He'd cut into other lanes plenty of times himself, just to get through congestion faster. But why did it feel like every lane he entered would immediately stop moving? It was almost completely frozen. Something was definitely wrong. The fat man sensed it too. Today felt unusually strange. The skinny man was a good driver, even with bad luck. It shouldn't be possible that every time he changed lanes, they'd only move past one or two cars before getting completely stuck again. He looked ahead and saw several traffic officers walking toward them. Then he glanced behind and saw a young man approaching with a group of police officers. "They're coming for us." The fat man's heart instantly sank. There was no need to think anymore. They were definitely in trouble. "Move." Without another word, he slapped a talisman onto himself and another onto the skinny man. Then he twisted his heavy body around and slapped two more talismans onto the two women in the back. Meanwhile, Officer Song had ridden my motorcycle and brought me to the scene as quickly as possible. We'd originally assumed the motorcycle's agility would let us get through quickly, but the road was almost completely blocked. Even the emergency lane had a long line of vehicles stuck in it, and the motorcycle could barely move forward. So Officer Song handed the motorcycle over to another officer at the scene, and the two of us continued toward the suspicious vehicle on foot. Just as we got close, I saw two people get out of the van. One of them was an enormous, heavily built, fat man. The moment he got out, he opened the rear door, grabbed one woman in each hand, threw them over his shoulders, and ran toward the left side of the road. "It's them," I pointed and shouted, without caring whether anyone else could even notice them. Then I immediately took off after them. One was skinny and the other was fat, but both were incredibly agile. Even the fat man carrying two women moved shockingly fast. Within a few strides, they crossed through the traffic and jumped off the expressway, disappearing into an orchard beside the road. I followed immediately. As a cultivator, even though I'd only just started, my body had already been in pretty good condition to begin with, so keeping up with them wasn't difficult. After running for roughly 10 minutes and getting far away from the highway, the two men finally slowed down. The skinny man looked back and realized I seemed to be the only one still following. He exchanged a look with the fat man, and they both stopped. The skinny man, with his rat-like features, looked me up and down. Looks like you've trained too, the obscuring talisman. Can't fool you. The obscuring talisman was one of the most basic charms still used today. Anyone with an especially strong will had a chance of seeing through it, let alone an actual cultivator. But there's only one of you. The fat man set the two women down from his shoulders and said, "Kid, you're really asking for a beating." Whoa. Just then, a breathless voice came from behind us. Officer Song looked like he'd nearly run himself to death. "Let me catch my breath first. You guys can seriously run." "A cop?" The skinny man looked completely baffled. He carefully studied Officer Song, then turned unhappily toward the fat man. "Don't tell me your talisman stopped working." "Impossible." The fat man looked surprised too, even without the divine buff. "My talismans have never failed before." "Failed?" Officer Song finally caught his breath. "It definitely fooled my colleagues, but don't underestimate me. Never underestimate the pressure on a middle-aged cop with elderly parents and young children depending on him. And definitely don't underestimate the bond between a middle-aged cop and the money he needs for his son's wedding and future home. Damn it. Even though Officer Song had caught up, I didn't feel relieved at all. If anything, this made things more complicated. This was the age of spiritual decline. Cultivators no longer had the power to overturn mountains and seas, or kill someone from 1,000 miles away. But after being refined by spiritual energy, their physical abilities were still far beyond those of ordinary people. Not to mention that they could combine those abilities with the spells and techniques that still worked in this era. In a situation like this, Officer Song wasn't exactly extra firepower. He was more like someone I'd have to protect. The skinny man and fat man exchanged a glance. The fat man slipped one hand into his pocket, while the skinny man hid his hands behind his back, clearly preparing something. "Hey kid," the skinny man stepped forward. "Hey," looking completely casual. "These days, life isn't easy for anybody. We're just workers too. Workers shouldn't make life hard for other workers. How about we pretend we never saw each other? Let us leave safely, and I guarantee you'll have cars, money, and women whenever you want. You've got an exciting future ahead of you. Why risk it over these two women? And you too, officer, if you let us go. We guarantee your career will take off. Like a rocket." The two men clearly didn't want to fight, and they genuinely didn't. Spiritual energy was precious in this era, and restoring it was extremely difficult. If they could avoid spending any, that was obviously best. I glanced at Officer Song beside me. One of us wanted to save people, and the other wanted a legitimate career-making achievement. That single glance was enough for us to understand each other. I will never compromise with evil. Negotiations over. "Move!" The fat and skinny duo were clearly battle-hardened. The instant negotiations collapsed. Both men moved, each pulling out a talisman with his left hand, while holding a gold-inlaid jade plaque in his right. Their fingers moved rapidly, forming several hand seals in quick succession. Zen thunder, summon lightning, leaf fire, transform and gather. Heaven and earth, lend me your power. Thunder, descend with overwhelming force. By sacred decree. Thunder art. The fat man chanted at incredible speed, yet every word came out perfectly clear. Spiritual energy gathered inside the gold-inlaid jade plaque in his right hand, and his own spiritual energy poured into the talisman. The next second, he threw it. Boom. It instantly transformed into a ball of lightning and shot toward Officer Song and me. Kun Earth, become my shield. Gen Mountain, become my barrier. 5 elements, stand firm. Let no evil pass. By sacred decree, Earth Shield. I wasn't slow either. I'd already anticipated his attack almost the instant he moved. Although I finished my chant half a beat after him, I didn't need a talisman. I pointed directly at the ground. Rumble, half a step in front of me. A wall of earth surged upward. The ball lightning slammed into the earthen wall, like a grenade exploding. The wall shattered instantly, while the lightning discharged all of its energy, and left scorched black electrical marks across the ground. At some point, The skinny man had already circled behind Officer Song and me. He was holding an emerald hairpin in his right hand. Its sharp tip glowed with green light as he thrust it toward Officer Song's forehead. Hee 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 hee. His laugh was shrill and creepy. Go to sleep. Once you're asleep, you won't know anything. The skinny man still didn't want to kill anyone, especially not a police officer. Not when he believed they had the situation completely under control. All he needed was to put us to sleep for a while. But at that exact moment, Officer Song suddenly pulled a can of police-grade pepper spray from his belt, aimed it directly at the skinny man's face, and sprayed. He was an experienced cop, after all, even though his career had been relatively peaceful. That didn't mean he'd never dealt with violent suspects before. He'd already been on high alert before arriving, and had mentally rehearsed several possible combat scenarios, making his own predictions about how a confrontation might unfold. He was older now, so his reactions were slightly slower, but not so slow that he couldn't respond at all. Besides, the tactic of drawing attention from the front, while someone else flanked from the side, had been used to death in military strategy. The moment he saw the fat man and me exchanging attacks, he'd been waiting for a flanking move. So, as soon as the bastard came around, Officer Song had already been ready to spray him directly in the face, full blast. Cultivators were much harder to deal with than ordinary people, but they were still flesh and blood. Their resistance might be higher, but their weak points were the same against something like this, sprayed directly into the eyes and nose. The pain was brutal. Ah! The skinny man's eyes instantly felt like they were on fire. He couldn't see anything. He was just about to shout that the target was tougher than expected and they needed to retreat. Bam, 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 bam. Officer Song simultaneously drew his expandable baton and struck 6 times in a row, giving the skinny man a very personal lesson in what 6 consecutive baton strikes felt like. Just then, the fat man suddenly leaped like an agile crane, crossing more than 10 meters and soaring over our heads. The next second, he came crashing down, like a mountain collapsing onto us. Oof! I grabbed Officer Song and flashed backward, retreating rapidly, 5 or 6 meters. The fat man slammed heavily into the ground. Boom! Countless clumps of dirt and sand exploded into the air, and dust instantly filled the area. So this was a cultivator. My eyes practically lit up. This was a cultivator. And this was still only a cultivator from the age of spiritual decline, in an era when spiritual energy was nearly exhausted. Just that tiny amount of spiritual energy could grant this much power. I genuinely couldn't imagine what cultivators had been like when spiritual energy was abundant. Fat cat. Damn it, fat cat. The skinny man climbed back up from the ground. A cultivator's physical condition was better than an ordinary person's, and their ability to withstand blows was greater too. 6 baton strikes hurt like hell, but he could still endure them. He blindly reached out and grabbed the fat man's clothes. The target's tougher than expected. Let's retreat. This should count as a workplace injury, right? If we don't run now, we're screwed. Fights between cultivators in the age of spiritual decline were usually very short. Everyone treasured their spiritual energy. The moment someone couldn't gain the upper hand, and the fight looked like it might turn into a stalemate, they would quickly find a way to disengage. Those battles from mythological stories, where people fought continuously for 3 days and 3 nights, traded hundreds of moves and then transformed again, simply couldn't happen anymore. A prolonged battle was impossible. Never mind the fact that more police could arrive at any moment. Once the pseudo-spirit stones inside their magical artifacts ran out of spiritual energy and became ordinary jade, their losses would be enormous. If things went bad, they ran. That was one skill every cultivator had to possess. The fat man slapped 2 talismans onto himself, then threw the skinny man over his shoulder and turned to flee. But just then, heaven and earth bind all law. Yin and yang halt their course. 5 elements suppress and break. All movements cease. An old but powerful voice echoed from every direction. It sounded as though countless people were speaking, and yet somehow, like only one person, 2 silver needles suddenly flew through the air and struck the 2 men, instantly freezing them in place. Not bad. Not bad at all. Impressive for someone so young. At that moment, an old man dressed in Taoist robes walked out from the south side of the orchard. His hair and beard were completely white, yet his face looked no older than his 40s. He stood tall and imposing, with an unmistakably powerful presence. I froze when I saw the old man, and almost shouted out loud. He looked exactly like the actor who played Zhu Di. More specifically, he looked exactly like Zhang Jue from The Outcast, played by that same actor. Even his voice was identical. If I hadn't known I'd transmigrated, I would have thought I'd somehow walked onto the set of The Outcast for real. This old Taoist is Zhang Wei, known as Xiao Yao. We'll meet again at your estate. You don't need to worry about those two girls either. They were only hit with a drowsy dream spell. They'll wake up naturally once they've slept enough. I had to admit, right? An old celestial master really was on another level. He'd appeared mysteriously, made a single move, and instantly immobilized the fat and skinny duo who were trying to escape. Then, in the blink of an eye, he vanished. Aside from the voice that seemed to come from nowhere, it was almost as if he'd never appeared at all. What happened? Are you guys okay? What happened here? Just then, the rest of the police finally arrived. It really did seem to be exactly as Officer Song had said. Police officers were far more accepting of bizarre situations than ordinary people. A few of the younger officers did look genuinely shocked, but most of them saw the battle marks on the ground and the two criminals frozen in place, then immediately looked toward Officer Song and me with obvious envy. Compared with the danger or supernatural mystery involved, what they cared about more seemed to be things like second-class and third-class merit awards. The way they looked at the two criminals made it seem as though they felt they'd missed out on something incredibly important. Everything after that was much simpler. The criminals were arrested and handcuffed, while the two women were carried out, and the aftermath was handled. As for how we'd actually captured them, almost nobody seemed curious, and hardly anyone asked. I went to the police station too and gave a statement, but when it came to the arrest itself, the two veteran officers taking my statement didn't seem interested in the details at all. They simply finished the basic paperwork, glossed over the actual capture process, and that was it. The moment I walked outside, my phone started ringing. I looked at the screen. Wasn't this Deputy Director Zhou? He was about to get promoted soon, though I still didn't know exactly where he'd end up. Uncle Joe, I answered the call with a cheerful smile. Tyler, how did things go? Deputy Director Joe asked with obvious concern. How's your girlfriend? Thanks for asking, Uncle Joe, I replied. She's already been sent back to the hospital. Nothing serious. She just needs to sleep until she wakes naturally. Good, as long as she's okay. Deputy Director Joe said, as long as she's okay. These human traffickers are getting way too bold. He sounded genuinely angry. The higher-ups are very interested in those two men too. They haven't only committed crimes here. They've done things elsewhere as well. The authorities in the capital have already received the news. They said the cases need to be consolidated. In a couple of days, they'll come take custody of the suspects and bring them back to the capital for a combined investigation. The capital is investigating them too? I asked in surprise. They've already been tracking them? Yeah. Deputy Director Joe sounded a little tired. They seem to be roaming offenders. They came into the capital from somewhere else, then left the capital and came here to commit another crime, and they just happened to get caught here. Everyone always says the capital has everything, plenty of police resources and all that. But looking at it now, it's not that impressive. We're the ones who ended up catching them, and now we're sending them back. Oh, I immediately understood. Uncle Joe, you probably shouldn't say that out loud. Oh, right. Deputy Director Joe changed the subject. You said you wanted jade and emerald. I've already asked around for you. I heard the suspects were carrying some jade and emerald too. You didn't do anything reckless, did you? The higher-ups said those items are important evidence, and now some of them can't be found. They aren't with you, are they? I immediately replied, a gentleman acquires wealth through proper means. I don't take things that don't belong to me. The call ended soon after, and my thoughts immediately settled. I had to admit, modern society really was efficient. Everything moved incredibly fast. But the information Deputy Director Joe had revealed didn't completely match my earlier assumptions. Those two men hadn't done this kind of thing for the first time. First, judging by their objective, the fat and skinny duo seemed to be searching for specific people. No one had said exactly where they'd gone before, but they'd traveled from somewhere else to the capital. then left the capital again, which meant the person behind them was probably based there. They had visited more than one place and carried out more than one job. The fact that the capital's police were coming to take custody so quickly meant they probably already had an operation prepared, putting all the useful information together. These two were likely hired by some powerful person in the capital to search for people matching a specific set of criteria, and among the people behind them, there was probably someone skilled in divination. And not just casually skilled, but extremely capable. Someone capable of calculating Emma's location. Then I suddenly noticed a problem. If the other side really had someone that powerful, why hadn't they sent people to capture Emma much earlier? A troubling possibility suddenly entered my mind. I leaned against the motorcycle, narrowed my eyes, and carefully thought back to everything my mentor had told me about divination and related techniques. Wait, all far and candors, too. I replayed every detail in my mind, and suddenly realized I'd done the one thing I absolutely shouldn't have done. After Emma told me her birth date and birth chart, I'd immediately performed a divination on her. In the age of spiritual decline, many powerful spells were incredibly troublesome to set up, but surprisingly easy to disrupt. The reason Emma had gone unnoticed for so long was most likely because whoever originally told her those secrets had concealed her fate from divination. But in the age of spiritual decline, this kind of fate-concealing technique was more like a one-way invisibility barrier. If someone tried divining without sufficiently detailed information, it was like searching for a needle in the ocean, and with the target hidden on top of that, finding her would be incredibly difficult. But if something disturbed the barrier from the inside, it could easily be broken. And my divination had done exactly that. It was basically like I'd turned on a public broadcast and allowed whoever was searching outside to lock onto the signal. That was why they'd found us so precisely. But because they couldn't determine whether the target was Grace or Emma, the fat and skinny duo had simply taken both of them. Wait, that's not right. Another problem suddenly occurred to me. In this age of spiritual decline, altering someone's real recorded date of birth was a simple but effective way of disrupting divination. It couldn't completely hide someone, the way a specialized occult concealment spell could against every kind of investigation, but it could still interfere with the diviner's judgment. If the other side could calculate such a precise location, they could have simply performed several more calculations by process of elimination, and eventually determined which woman was actually the person they wanted. Yet they had taken both women, which meant Grace's real birthday wasn't the date she'd listed on her employment information, and her fate was somehow connected to mine. Now that I'd stepped onto the path of cultivation, even though the road ahead would be difficult, I believed I could carve my way through every obstacle and create a new path in this age of spiritual decline. So, for someone like me, ordinary women were already becoming difficult to take seriously. But Grace was destined to become involved with me somehow in the future. There was some event tied to both of us. So, was it possible that Grace possessed some kind of special constitution too? One that might not be any weaker than Emma's? Was that why the enemy had grabbed her, while taking Emma as well? Then what kind of constitution did Grace have? If it wasn't the same as Emma's, could she have some legendary emperor-level potential? Something like a phoenix divine body? Now this is getting interesting. My phone suddenly started ringing, just as I was about to leave. I looked at it. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered. Hello? Seventh brother? It's me. A very familiar voice came through the phone, sounding anxious, with the faintest hint of tears. It's Grace. Huh? I frowned. What do you want? Now this was unexpected. I hadn't thought she'd actually call me. I resisted the urge to hang up immediately. Just tell me what happened. Someone's causing trouble at Third Sister's hospital. Grace said anxiously. They've already injured several doctors and destroyed an entire set of ICU equipment. Several hospital security guards were injured by him too. He keeps insisting that this hospital is useless and that all the equipment is a scam. He even humiliated Third Sister right in front of everyone. I know you and I have our issues, but Third Sister never did anything to you, right? Third Sister, I didn't know whether to laugh or sigh. Though in those real air, fake air novels, there usually was at least one person who treated the real heir somewhat decently. Of course, decently was relative, compared with everyone else. The person who treated the real heir slightly better might simply be someone who didn't immediately attack him, beat him or physically punish him, or constantly humiliate him. Maybe they only gave him the cold shoulder, or perhaps they simply worked away from home most of the year and barely had any contact with the real heir. So which of the Carter sisters fit that description? The oldest, second, and third sisters. The oldest sister had married early and already had a family of her own, though she rarely came home. The second sister worked in the Capitol, though I'd already gotten her arrested, and her trial hadn't happened yet. The third sister was a doctor, who often worked overtime. She even owned an apartment near the hospital, so she was too busy to come home very often. As for why I wasn't considering the fourth sister, she was a travel writer, with her own RV, currently traveling across the country. She wouldn't be back for at least another year or so. Jesus, and now, only the oldest and third sisters really fit the pattern. Call the police. Preserve all the evidence. Tell security not to confront him directly. Secure the scene and don't let him leave. I spoke in an ordinary tone. I'm not a police officer. Calling me isn't going to help. It's not abyss. I hung up, sneered. I was basically the kind of player who hadn't even finished the first playthrough yet. So what if third sister met the first condition for awakening? In novels, people like that usually only did slightly less damage than everyone else. As for the Carter family, or more specifically Robert Carter's household, even though I had no intention of using future events to condemn people in the present, the impression that family had already left on me was like seeing a cockroach crawling beside a mountain of gold. Teaching Grace how to call the police was already the most help I was willing to offer. I didn't think about it any further, and was about to leave. Oh, Tyler. Just then, Officer Song also walked out of the Keownan District Public Security Bureau. When he saw I hadn't left yet, he happily walked over. My lucky star, give your uncle the honor of having a meal together. What are you talking about? I laughed too. How could I possibly be anyone's lucky star? If you hadn't cleared the way ahead of me, those people might have escaped before I even arrived. I'm the one who should be treating you. Come on. I pulled out my phone and was about to search for a nearby restaurant, when Officer Song immediately pressed my hand down. If you're searching for some fancy place around here, then you can go by yourself. I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm not used to eating that kind of food, and I don't have that kind of money either. I can only afford something normal. Come on. Without giving me a chance to argue, he dragged me toward a small restaurant nearby. Once inside, he ordered 2 bowls of knife-cut noodles. Then he casually placed the small bag he was carrying beside the condiment jars holding vinegar and chili oil. Again, Officer Song stretched. I really have to thank you, Tyler. What are you talking about? I shook my head. I didn't do. Officer Song cut me off with a sigh. Hey, you've already heard about those 2 men, right? Of course. I nodded. They're roaming criminals. Don't worry. Officer Song sounded like he was reassuring me. Whatever credit belongs to you won't disappear. A 500 yuan banner for bravery? I laughed softly. I was saving my own fiancé. That hardly counts as heroic civilian action. You were still brave and resourceful, Officer Song said. Actually, there's something I wanted to ask you about. What? I asked, confused. You want me to tell your fortune? It's about the hairpin and the jade pendant those 2 men were carrying, Officer Song asked seriously. I heard from my superiors that you really like that kind of thing. You didn't take them while we weren't looking, did you? What? I scratched my head, looking genuinely baffled. A gentleman seeks wealth through proper means. Why would I take something like that? Technically speaking, I'm an heir to the Carter family. Those 2 pieces of junk aren't enough to tempt me. Fair point. Officer Song nodded. Your family does have money. But the higher-up said, those 2 items are important evidence. They weren't found on the suspects. So I figured they might have been lost during the fight. I heard they're pretty important. The Keownan precinct has already sent people back to search the scene. Exactly, that makes sense. We didn't see any hairpin or jade pendant. If I really wanted something like that, I could just buy it myself. Speaking of which, I suddenly asked, what did those 2 things look like? I'm actually curious about the jade pendant and hairpin. That made you guys suspect I took them. They must have looked pretty expensive, Officer Song said. They might have been stolen goods those two picked up somewhere. They're apparently worth a lot. If you see them, bring them to me immediately. Chicken broth, knife-cut noodles, coming up. The restaurant owner brought over 2 bowls. Our chicken broth knife-cut noodles, especially the broth, are our specialty. The owner spoke enthusiastically. I guarantee you'll never forget the taste. He's not exaggerating, Officer Song said, especially if you add vinegar. He casually picked up the small vinegar pot, poured some into his bowl, then put it back. Tyler, do you eat yours with vinegar? Officer Song asked while mixing his noodles. They don't taste right without it. I glanced over and noticed that beneath his little bag, a small paper packet had appeared at some point. Judging from its shape, it seemed to contain something square and something long. Of course, I cheerfully reached for the vinegar. If Uncle Song recommends it, how could I refuse? The Carter Ancestral Hall was located northwest of Shanghai City, around 10 kilometers away, in a village called Zhangjiabao, as the name suggested. Most of the people in the village had the surname Zhang. Originally, the Carter family had simply been one farming household in Zhangjiabao. The ancestor who had gone overseas to seek his fortune had gone partly by force and partly by choice. Only after becoming successful did he gradually use various means to turn the Carter family into one of the village's most prominent households. Even after becoming wealthy, however, the village's name was never changed, and it had remained the same ever since. After Grandpa Carter's father returned and rejoined the ancestral clan, he donated money and supplies to support the village, then acquired a new piece of land and built an ancestral hall to enshrine the Carter family's ancestors. On us day, a Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly entered the village and came to a smooth stop in the parking area outside the ancestral hall. Grandpa Carter looked both pained and helpless as he said, "That disgraceful descendant of my family is being held inside." Celestial Master Zhang remained calm, though a trace of curiosity appeared in his eyes. There aren't many people who practice gu arts anymore? So naturally, I was curious enough to come. After all, there aren't many techniques left these days that don't rely heavily on spiritual energy, and gu techniques are one of them, though gu arts are generally considered rather underhanded methods. Gu insects themselves are among the milder branches, and are relatively easier for people to accept. Their nurturing process doesn't necessarily violate basic human morality. Of course, raising certain gu insects can still be extremely cruel. But because the gentler methods that can produce useful gu insects take an extremely long time. When Grandpa Carter invited him, he decided to come down from the mountain and take a look. Partly, he wanted to see this gu practitioner, and partly, he wanted to see what had become of the Qilin, whose fate he'd calculated years ago. He had already met that Qilin, and the young man was indeed impressive. Now he wanted to see this gu practitioner. He had received notice early that morning, so servants and bodyguards had already been arranged at the ancestral hall at that moment. 2 young and beautiful women hurried over to open the doors. The 2 men got out of the car, and under the servants' guidance, quickly entered the ancestral hall. Celestial Master Zhang soon arrived before the Carter family's ancestral tablets. Robert Carter's eldest son had already been brought over and forced to kneel before the ancestral tablets. The moment Celestial Master Zhang walked in, his brows furrowed slightly. He raised a hand, signaling Grandpa Carter not to speak. He slowly stepped forward and circled around Daniel Carter twice. Then, in a voice that was 7 parts gentle and 3 parts authoritative, he said, "Raise your head and let me take a look." It was Daniel's first time meeting Celestial Master Zhang. After being locked up for some time, he no longer looked anything like the pampered rich young man he once was. His hair had grown long and a beard had started covering his face. His expression was haggard and terrified. He looked like a frightened, stray dog that had suddenly lost all protection. His eyes were filled with barely concealed resentment and fear. When he heard Celestial Master Zhang's voice, his body trembled. He raised his head but didn't dare meet the old man's eyes. Celestial Master Zhang studied Daniel's features, and his brows furrowed even deeper. He made a quick calculation with his fingers, then told Grandpa Carter, "Have someone take the boy away and clean him up." Grandpa Carter gave the servants a look, and they quickly escorted Daniel away again. This time, however, they moved him to another room, one that was slightly better than the last. Celestial Master Zhang then returned to Grandpa Carter. "Mr. Carter, would you mind if we spoke privately?" Grandpa Carter immediately understood that they were about to discuss the real issue. He quickly dismissed the servants and personally led Celestial Master Zhang into the rear hall. The two sat down at a table. Only then did Grandpa Carter ask, "Celestial Master, did you see what was wrong? It's a goo insect. Definitely a goo insect. But it's an emotion goo." Grandpa Carter's mouth fell open in disbelief. "Isn't that the kind of thing used for romance between men and women? I thought it would be something terrifying. But it's only that? Only that?" Celestial Master Zhang remained perfectly calm. Romantic desire is emotion, but so is the affection parents feel toward their children. This child merely used an emotion goo to make his parents and sisters pay more attention to him. It was wrong, but not enough to explain what happened. The real problem isn't the goo insect. Not the goo insect. Grandpa Carter's expression grew even more serious. "Mr. Carter," Celestial Master Zhang asked, "may this old Taoist meet the child's biological parents?" Grandpa Carter immediately sighed. The boy had a hard life. His parents died very young. A hard life? Celestial Master Zhang's tone became slightly meaningful. "Mr. Carter, look at this child's facial features. His nose is full and well-formed. His jaw is broad and rounded. His forehead is smooth. His nasolabial lines are shallow. His features are balanced. And his philtrum is clear. Before this disaster, he should have had a calm and peaceful complexion. Do you know what that kind of face represents?" Grandpa Carter had studied this sort of thing, at least a little. From those descriptions, he could tell they were probably favorable signs. But he still shook his head. He didn't know the exact meaning. Wealth, but not great authority. Disasters may come, but they won't destroy him. His life should generally be peaceful and smooth. Celestial Master Zhang's expression gradually became solemn, and he also has the features of someone destined for longevity. Putting him in the position of heir to the Carter family wasn't necessarily a mistake, as long as he stayed out of politics. He might not have been able to push the Carter family much higher, but he should have been capable of preserving its existing wealth. Even if some unexpected disaster struck, he would merely lose part of the fortune, and the remainder would still be enough to keep him wealthy. After that, Celestial Master Zhang thought for a moment and continued. "As for the great Qilin of your family, his forehead is broad and his temples are full. If he entered government, his official career would flourish, and his path would be open. His eyebrows are refined, clean, and relaxed, showing intelligence and quick thinking. His thoughts are meticulous, while his eyes shine like bright stars, with clearly defined black and white. Yet his spirit remains restrained, showing lofty ambition. His decisions are firm, and his nose is straight and full, like a suspended gallbladder. His wealth palace is strong, meaning his financial fortune will remain abundant for a long time. He has already begun to reveal his potential, although many trials await him. Every trial he survives will push him another step higher. His fortune is extraordinarily strong, with purple energy approaching from the east, the sign of someone favored by tremendous destiny." Celestial Master Zhang stroked his beard as he spoke. "If he and that child from earlier truly treated each other like brothers, your Carter family would undoubtedly prosper for another 3 or even 4 generations, and remain powerful and flourishing." Grandpa Carter was stunned, so his original plan hadn't been wrong. But then why did everything end up like this? He simply couldn't understand it. Celestial Master Zhang continued. "A child's facial features and fortune are partly inherited from their parents, then through their own effort, upbringing, experiences, and many other factors. They gradually develop their own individual appearance and aura, but generally speaking, even after someone reaches adulthood, you can still see traces of their parents in their face and fortune." Could it be? Grandpa Carter's eyes widened. Exactly. Celestial Master Zhang nodded. For this child to possess such features, his parents' own facial signs and fortune, couldn't have been too poor, at least judging from the paternal line. His father shouldn't have been someone destined to die young. The same may apply to his grandmother. After all, Mr. Carter, you yourself carry auspicious jade energy, and your facial signs suggest a long and enduring ancestral line. Even if your son married a foreign woman, she most likely wouldn't have been someone bitter, cruel, or excessively aggressive. After thinking for a moment, Celestial Master Zhang made another quick calculation with his fingers. This is only a rough calculation, but your daughter-in-law should have been at least half Chinese. Her parents may have lived overseas for many years, but they never forgot their roots. She should have been educated and well-mannered, with both decent financial fortune and good luck. She shouldn't have died young, neither should the child's father. You mean Connor? Grandpa Carter looked uncomfortable as he spoke. When I sent people to bring him back, he was already addicted to every vice imaginable. His body had been completely ruined. I originally planned to force him to quit those habits and slowly nurse his health back. But as Grandpa Carter spoke, grief spread across his face, and he looked close to tears. What about the child's mother? Celestial Master Zhang asked again. Grandpa Carter shook his head. I don't know much about her. I only heard Connor say that after they married, she despised him for not earning enough money and ran off with another man. That's where the problem lies. Celestial Master Zhang thought for a moment. If we trace backward from the child's face and fortune, then logically, your daughter-in-law should have been capable of raising the child into adulthood on her own, even if the child lacked a father during those years, with his maternal grandparents protecting him. He still shouldn't have fallen into the circumstances you described. And, by Daniel's generation, his parents should have both been alive and healthy, meaning you would never have needed to bring him back. Even if you wanted to bring him back, you wouldn't have needed to do things the way you did. This child may never have become an extraordinary genius, but he should have been cautious and steady, and most likely capable of preserving the family business. But instead, his parents died young, and so did his grandmother and maternal grandparents. That directly damaged the child's natural fortune. He was brought back too early, going from extreme poverty to sudden wealth. And because he was treated as an adopted child, he became overly cautious, which gradually twisted his personality, until he ended up like this. Someone did interfere behind the scenes, but what happened today is also partly the consequence of his own actions. Grandpa Carter suddenly felt dizzy. He could tell. That Celestial Master Zhang was still holding something back. Are you saying all of this goo insect business is actually only a minor issue? A sharp gleam appeared in Celestial Master Zhang's eyes. Someone is using this child to exchange destinies, and they're using an extremely vicious method. When I examined the child's fortune just now, he should have had a few minor disasters, but he absolutely shouldn't have been surrounded by so much black energy, as though a fatal calamity were approaching, mixed into that aura. There also seemed to be traces of curse techniques from the Nanyang region. They probably first used this child to drain the fortune of his maternal family, causing his grandmother, maternal grandparents, and father to die young. Then, after he returned, they began using him to exchange away the fortune of your Carter family. Overseas, Nanyang? Grandpa Carter's heart jolted. Could it be someone from the Nanyang branch? But that doesn't make sense. When my father split from the family and returned to the mainland, he only took the shipping business with him. Meanwhile, the Nanyang branch of the Carter family has developed extremely quickly these past few years. After the mainland launched the Belt and Road Maritime Initiative, they leveraged their position as the richest family in the region to become one of the leading representatives of the local Chinese community. They now have considerable regional influence, and the rules overseas are different from those here. That branch of the Carter family has genuinely used its enormous wealth to spread its influence throughout the local government, and even gain control over the local power industry, oil, and other energy industries. They're unquestionably a regional powerhouse. My branch may have become the richest family in this city, but we're still only the richest family in one city. I have some influence within the government, but only a limited amount. Don't let the title of richest man fool you. When dealing with the government, I still have to be extremely careful. Aside from Connor's branch of the family, besides, everyone knows why my grandfather split from the family and returned to the mainland in the first place. If someone really wanted to exchange destinies, then logically I should be the one trying to steal theirs. Because destiny exchange still follows the principle of flowing from high to low. If a rich person exchanged fate with a poor person, that wouldn't be an exchange. That would be charity, and it'd be charity paid for. with the fortunes of your own descendants. Who would be stupid enough to do that? Then what about Daniel? Grandpa Carter asked tentatively. After all, Daniel was the descendant of the woman he'd once loved most. If there was any way to save him, he wanted to try. Mr. Carter, please don't be angry. Celestial Master Zhang considered his words for a moment, then spoke very directly. The best place for that child right now is prison. There is no better option. Prison? Grandpa Carter froze. That was the outcome he least wanted to see. Once Daniel went inside, the bloodline of his first love would essentially be ruined. He may have been ruthless and decisive when he was younger, but old age always made people think more about family. The reason he'd gotten Daniel out and confined him here was precisely because he didn't want the boy sent to prison. Once he went in, his career and future would be almost completely destroyed, and he'd have a criminal record, which might even affect that entire branch of the family in the future. Celestial Master Zhang saw through Grandpa Carter's thoughts and stroked his white beard. Mr. Carter, this child's fate has already been tampered with. If he remains with the Carter family, not only will he continue draining your family's fortune, he'll inevitably become entangled with your eldest grandson again. I can see that your eldest grandson is capable of tolerance. But if this child continues provoking and entangling himself with him, then sooner or later he will die at your eldest grandson's hands. Secondly, for the child himself, judging from his face, he inherited many good qualities from his father's side. But his mother is another matter. Based on my estimation, his mother is someone calculating, yet short-sighted, greedy, shameless, and obsessed with money. I calculated briefly just now, and that woman is still alive. The fact that she married the boy's father and gave birth to him means there must have been some other reason behind it. It definitely wasn't love. A sly look appeared on Celestial Master Zhang's face, and whoever used this child to exchange destinies probably never expected things to develop like this. Who does a prisoner interact with most inside prison? Destiny exchange works both ways. Once someone has been caught in this technique, even I can't completely undo it in a short time. As long as this child remains with the Carter family, he'll continuously drain the Carter family's fortune and exchange it with the family on the other side. But what if the child spends his time with convicted criminals instead? Grandpa Carter slapped his forehead. Brilliant. Destiny exchange goes both ways. Whether it's good fortune or bad, it always flows from the higher side toward the lower. Everyone knows what kind of people end up in prison. So after he goes inside, the good fortune that was stolen won't necessarily return to the Carter family. But for those prisoners, it might actually change their lives. You could even count that as Daniel doing a good deed. Celestial Master Zhang continued. And Mr. Carter, don't underestimate prisons. In modern times, most prison officers carry a strong aura of righteousness, and prisons themselves are often built with feng shui principles in mind, to suppress evil, restrain malignant forces, and purge corrupt thoughts. They also borrow the vast fortune of the nation itself, using the country's dragon veins and national destiny as suppression, so evil forces dare not enter and wicked thoughts have nowhere to hide. The inmates themselves may not be admirable, but the prison can still become a purified space, where evil influences cannot survive, and anything that enters will be suppressed. As I said earlier, this child isn't only carrying a goo insect. There are also traces of Nanyang curse techniques on him. Even I can't completely understand them at a glance. But techniques like those cannot easily enter prisons in our country, or places like government institutions and military bases. The people working there are protected by the nation's fortune as well. If those petty tricks dare approach, they'll suffer immediate backlash. Grandpa Carter nodded, finally accepting the explanation. Celestial Master Zhang then added one more point. This child has been affected by those evil techniques so deeply that they've practically seeped into his bones. His personality has already been completely distorted. Once he enters prison and is surrounded by righteous energy, it may gradually wear away the evil thoughts inside him. And if he genuinely reforms himself, then when he comes out, he may still become useful. At that time, Mr. Carter, you could give him a few businesses, and he might manage them quite well. But if you continue keeping him here, he'll inevitably become a serious hidden danger. After hearing Celestial Master Zhang say that, Grandpa Carter finally made up his mind completely. He summoned the secretary who had come with him, and quietly gave him a few instructions. Then he stood up. "I'll have to trouble you once more, Celestial Master. Would you mind coming with me to another place?" He personally led the way. Before long, the car left the Carter Ancestral Hall. By evening, it entered the Carter family's Binhai estate. Most members of the Carter family, except Hannah, who had already been arrested, Daniel, who would soon be sent away as well, and those who couldn't return, were all present. Robert Carter, Grace Carter, Chloe Carter, and several of the other sisters. Respectfully allowed Celestial Master Zhang to examine them. After looking them over, he didn't say much. He simply closed his eyes and calculated silently for a long time, before finally letting out a heavy sigh. Then, accompanied by Grandpa Carter, he walked outside the estate and began examining the surroundings, seeing Celestial Master Zhang's expression. Grandpa Carter couldn't help asking, "Is something wrong, Mr. Carter?" Celestial Master Zhang sighed. "How much attention have you actually paid to your children's upbringing?" Grandpa Carter looked confused. He wanted to say, that he'd always taken his children's education seriously. He had hired famous teachers, found ways to get them into elite schools, and never neglected tutoring or extracurricular lessons. Everything required for elite education in a wealthy family had been provided without exception. But judging from Celestial Master Zhang's expression, he realized there was clearly a deeper meaning behind the question. So he didn't answer immediately. "When your eldest son was in school, what were his grades? How many parent-teacher meetings did you personally attend?" Celestial Master Zhang asked. "When his mother died, where were you?" Forgive this old Taoist for speaking bluntly. The goo insects and destiny exchange are only minor factors. Your lack of care and attention toward your children is the real reason everything reached this point. Celestial Master Zhang continued, "I have to admire whoever designed all of this. Their planning was extraordinarily deep. That person may have started setting things up while you were still young, but ultimately, these sinister techniques, while hidden, were never completely without flaws. Mr. Carter, even though you aren't a cultivator like us, when your wife was still alive, even if you didn't love her, if you'd simply come home more often and paid a little more attention, you could have noticed something was wrong. If you'd cared more about your eldest son, you would have realized that the changes in his personality were different from an ordinary rebellious phase. And when your eldest grandson was born, if you hadn't made those plans," Celestial Master Zhang shook his head, "your eldest grandson's calculations weren't wrong. Goo insects, curses, and similar techniques did indeed influence them. But the real root of the problem lies with you. You had many chances to fix things. But what happened? Lu, step by step, pushed everything toward the worst possible outcome." Grandpa Carter's body trembled as he listened. His lips moved, but no words came out. After hesitating for a long while, he finally waved his hand and summoned the servant. "Go get Robert. No, bring the young master here." The servant quickly left and returned only a few minutes later, bringing Robert Carter with him. At that moment, Robert Carter showed none of the commanding presence of a powerful CEO. He looked cautious and submissive. "People, father, you wanted to see me?" But Grandpa Carter opened and closed his mouth several times, before finally saying, "Celestial Master Zhang has already told me some things, and Tyler has also stepped onto the path of cultivation. He has calculated certain things too, so don't try to hide anything. Both Tyler and the Celestial Master have already told me enough. You hate me, don't you?" The moment Grandpa Carter said that both Celestial Master Zhang and I had already uncovered certain things, Robert's previously submissive demeanor finally disappeared. A strange expression appeared on his face. "Goo insects, curses, voodoo dolls, kumanthong, yin amulets, blood curses, goo ha ha ha." It was as though a secret he'd hidden for years had finally been exposed, and he burst into crazed laughter.